Hey everyone, guess what? We do not have ugly swag. We have spaced out radio gear that you're going to want to wear. Why? Because no one wants to wear ugly clothing. So head on over to spacedoutradio.com and go shopping today. You'll be glad you did. And it's a great way to support our show. Once you get your gear, send us a picture of you rocking out in your SOR swag. spacedoutradio.com, shop there today, and make yourself look good. Welcome to Spaced Out Radio, the After Hours Radio edition. Again, I'm filling in for Dave Scott here tonight. It is going to be a fantastic show. We have paranormal investigator Loyd Auerbach coming on. He's also an author amongst a bunch of other things. We'll be getting into the whole paranormal side of this thing tonight. Should be really, really, really awesome. Great show coming up ahead. Don't go anywhere. Let me go ahead and check the medal positions for the night, courtesy of Race Fan. Race Fan shows that Eternity Eternal gets the gold tonight, which is awesome. Race Fan coming in with that silver, and then Kitty Catty Whack with the bronze. So we want to make sure we welcome everybody in, as many people as we can for the show starts. Eternity Eternal, hi Rob G. Hey Eternity Eternal, thanks for coming in. Race Fan, good evening Rob. Good evening Race Fan, thanks for coming in. Kitty Catty Whack, appreciate you coming on in, saying hi Rob. Right back to you. SJ is in the building. Appreciate you coming on in, SJ. Also, Deidre C in the building. Thank you so much for coming on in here, Deidre C, as we're filling in for Dave Scott here tonight. Who else do we have? We got Frankie B. Frankie B saying good evening, Frankie B. We got Linda saying hola, SOR peeps. Hola, right back to you, Linda. Thanks for coming on in. We do appreciate you showing on up. We got Fast Hemi in the building saying hello. Hello, Fast Hemi. Thanks for showing up tonight. Paramar. Howdy, folks. Hey, Paramar. Thanks for showing up here tonight. We also got Mel WD40 getting us lubed up and ready for the show, saying hello to all. Hello, right back to you, Mel WD40. Appreciate you showing on up tonight. Miss Catherine Jones is here. Hello, day, Mr. Rob G and SOR fans. We appreciate you coming in. Miss Catherine Jones, as always. And who else do we have? Let's keep going down the list. Can we get everybody in before the start of the show? Maybe. Let's see. Who do we have? We have T-Bone in the building saying hi, Mr. Rob G and all. Appreciate you showing on up. Tim James is in the building saying, see you at 11. We will see you soon here, Tim James. Thanks for showing up here as well. Tonight's Road Flare in the building. Hi, Rob. Hi, Road Flare. Right back to you. Flat 6. You hear that roar? That's the sound of the high octane Wu train coming in hot. I like that, Flat 6. Thanks for coming on in. Robert Lamont Jr. is here as well. Flubber Lane. Appreciate you showing on up. Let's see. Who else do we have? We're almost down the list. We're almost there. Paul Holland is in the building. Appreciate showing up, Paul Holland. Emperor Penguin as well. Hillbilly Herb. Let's see. Matt Gudcup, appreciate you coming on in. Hi, Robbie and the SORs. We appreciate showing on up. We really, really do. Algaray, YouTube, thanks for coming in. KAS, thanks for showing up here tonight. Let's see. Lee the B. Lee the B is in the building. Hey, Lee the B. Kevin Kennedy, TMI. Walter Kokubinski, thanks for showing on up. And Billy Gunn, appreciate showing on up. Got to start the podcast side. Almost got everybody. Man, I'll get you on the next break for sure. Here we go. Welcome to Spaced Out Radio, the After Hours Radio Show edition. Filling in for Dave Scott here tonight is Mr. Rob G. It's going to be an awesome show. We have paranormal investigator, author Loyd Auerbach for hours 1 and 2. We got Tim James with the UFO report coming in hour 3, plus Steve Stockton tells Untold Mysteries. Let's get ready to start the show right about now. Greetings, space travelers. Welcome home. You've just tuned your dial to Spaced Out Radio, the only place where you can own the night. I am your host, Mr. Rob G. Filling in for Dave Scott. Tonight we'll be broadcasting on the terrestrial affiliates across North America, plus digital platforms all around the world. Don't forget, you can access our archives for absolutely free. YouTube.com/Spaced Out Radio. While you're there, please consider hitting the subscribe button and the like button. Also, don't forget to follow us on X and Instagram at Spaced Out Radio and at Spaced Out Radio Show. Our website is spacedoutradio.com, where the options are endless. You can stay up to date with the SOR Newswire. Get yourself some official Spaced Out swag. Plus, rock to the man that you hear right there, Mr. Ron Bubble Fathal, and so much more. Once again, we are going to have a great show tonight. We got Loyd Auerbach joining us for hours 1 and 2. Then Tim James with the UFO report coming in hour 3. Steve Stockton tells Untold Mysteries. Maybe some UFO and weird news. It's going to be an action-packed show. Make sure you stay right here, right where you're at, as we get ready to go ahead and jump right on into the show like we always do and bring on our guest of the night. The man of hours 1 and 2 here is going to be none other than our guest, Loyd Auerbach. How you doing, Lloyd?
Good, thanks. Thanks, Rob.
All right, let me go ahead and read this here because this should be read. Loyd Auerbach is a world-recognized paranormal authority and parapsychologist, has 45 plus years of experience investigating the paranormal and over 40 years teaching courses in parapsychology, thousands of media appearances, director of the Office of Paranormal Investigation, president of Forever Family Foundation, and adjunct professor at Atlantic University and president of the board of directors of the Ryan Research Center, where he teaches online parapsychology courses through the Ryan Education Center, co-author of 9 books for the paranormal, and professional mentalist. Just a long list of accolades here, and you deserve to have them all read, sir, as we go ahead and get ready to jump into the show. So, meeting you for the first time, just like any other guest, you know, we all have met here within this UFO community, and it's always interesting to know the journey that you took to get here. So what kind of led you down this path to pick up parapsychology? Did you have any sightings or any encounters, anything when you were young? And let's kind of start there.
Well, actually, I have to say that my family's in television, and I had a TV set in my room when I was 2, so it's probably television, TV shows, and also comic books and mythology books, but also science books. In the mid-'60s, I discovered the term parapsychology while watching Dark Shadows on TV. Got me into the library, found the science books by J.B. Ryan and other folks in the late 60s, and started a parapsychology club in my high school in Elmsford, New York. I was very fortunate to meet area parapsychologists in the New York area in Westchester County. And it just kind of kept pushing me. The universe kept pushing me in the right direction till I finally, timing-wise, was able to get a graduate degree, a master's degree accredited in parapsychology from John F. Kennedy University, which had just started a program. Unfortunately, no longer exists. But it just the universe kept putting me in that direction. I didn't really have any psychic experiences until after I got into the field, although I did see a UFO when I was about 10 years old. So
that's a good way to start it out. Something strange like that. What made you, what was the determining factor that made you take on your first paranormal case? Like, what was the thought process going into that?
That was my first semester at John F. Kennedy University in the graduate program. One of the courses I was taking was a field investigations course, both the history and process methods of doing investigations from a parapsychology perspective. And the university was getting calls from people in the greater Bay Area because the press had covered the program. So the head of the department, John Palmer, sent students out to do investigations. And it was really, that was the inception of my doing investigations at that point, was an assignment more than anything else.
Wow. Okay. And so parapsychology, just the whole paranormal topic being in high school, when you're in groups like that, the cool kids kind of look at you a certain kind of way. How was the stigma as far as that goes back in that time, if you wouldn't mind going into that?
Yeah, there really wasn't a stigma in the 70s. That stigma really didn't start for the most part until the 80s. And I had two teachers, both physics and earth science teachers, who helped us start the actual class or start the club. And my high school was a junior senior high, and we only had a little over 600 students. And there were at one point 25 students in the parapsychology club, which is a pretty hefty percentage of that number of kids. Almost all of them were in high school. There were a couple in junior high as well. But we were very fortunate because I was introduced to, like I said, a couple of New York area parapsychologists, Montague Ullman and Gertrude Schmeidler. They helped us with the club. We did experiments. We didn't do investigations. It was not a ghost hunting club. It was really about looking at ESP and psychokinesis, mind over matter. And we did at one point go and connect with a spiritualist church because they were having some really great lecturers come in and talk about parapsychology as well.
So once you got into it, you went on your first investigation during the high school period. So what ended up being like the mission statement for you going into this field professionally? What is it that you want to accomplish or uncover in the field of parapsychology?
So that first investigation was graduate school, not high school.
Okay.
But for me, it was pretty clear, number one, that what we're dealing with is a bunch of mysteries that need to be looked at. And unfortunately, mainstream science completely ignores that stuff or calls it, woo-woo or something else. So that's not scientific to my mind, to the mind of many of folks in my field. So that was part of it, was looking at these are mysteries, and they're kind of cool. I mean, people having psychic abilities is kind of like superheroes. And again, I'm a comic book guy. So that was really cool. But for me, as I got into graduate school, I realized that my family background in media and some of my undergraduate background, which is in anthropology, was incredibly directional to me becoming an educator in the field and also being a person who could translate the concepts of the science into things that people could understand. So I had always intended from graduate school to be kind of a translator to the general public. It just kind of became natural for me because my dad was on TV. I had an uncle on television, another uncle who was a newscaster for radio. So it just has been pushing me in that direction all along, while also doing investigations, because those are a lot more interesting to me than working in a laboratory.
What do you think is one of the biggest misconceptions when you have someone from the outside looking at the field of parapsychology? What is one of the things that people get wrong most of the time?
That there's no science to it. I think that the skeptics organizations in the 70s and 80s really made it difficult for people to even talk about their experiences. But really, that we do have a science that's been around for well over 140 years. But most importantly, the biggest misconception is nothing is paranormal about psychic phenomena. So many people have these experiences in their lives, even if it's only a one-off, by the numbers of people who have reported these things and the people who have talked about them. And looking at cultures around the world, these are normal, though rare, experiences. So they really shouldn't be looked at as paranormal. They should be looked at as, hey, these are experiences of human beings that also support the idea that we have a lot more capability than the world likes to tell us. We're kind of shut down in a lot of ways, and that we may actually survive the death of our bodies. I mean, there's some scientific evidence to that as well.
Take us down that path. What do you, as far as the research you've done up to this point, what is your best guess of what's next, if you could describe it for anyone?
So what's next thing, number one, from the evidence is that some people, when they die, can stick around for a time, and there's various reasons why they might stick around as what we call ghosts, or we like to use the term apparition, and can interact. There's a lot of folklore about ghosts that is sort of true. It's true in some individual cases, but in reality, ghosts are people too. They're just dead. They don't have a body, but they haven't really changed their personality. They haven't gotten smarter since they died. They haven't gotten nicer, or certainly not evil. That doesn't happen. But that's one of the pieces that we've found, is that some people stick around, but most people do not stick around. Outside of the vast majority of ghost experiences happen when we see or experience someone, a friend, a relative, a loved one who has just died. So most experiences with ghosts happen within less than a week, and then the people are gone. They don't stick around. Working with mediums over the years and looking into what has been looked at around the world for cross-culturally about what people believe and what people have experienced, we don't know exactly what the next world is like, or the next state of existence actually is. There's a lot of, people talk about, well, it's a nice, pleasant area, and you can do art, or you can do whatever you want. There's variations of the afterlife. To my mind, and talking to a lot of the folks who communicate ostensibly with people on the other side, it's more different than we can imagine. Can you imagine being without a body?
No, I can't, actually.
I mean, in some respects, I think Richard Matheson might have been right when he wrote the book, What Dreams May Come. We create our own heaven and hell on the other side. That was also a movie with Robin Williams.
I had this idea of, maybe, okay, so this is how I look at it. Just tell me if you even thought about this. So it just say life is land, and then the place where you go when you die is the ocean. And the people that you talk about, the apparitions that kind of hang around right after passing, I feel like those are people like clinging onto the coastline, if I'm using a good enough analogy, and that they're just afraid or not ready to go out there into the open ocean. Some people just go right away, but you find those ones more afraid to take that next step. Do you think there's any awareness there as far as that goes? And how would you explain the reason why they might stick around the way that they do?
Well, first, I want to say I've never heard that metaphor, but it's great. I think it's a great metaphor. That's a great way of looking at it. What we find, however, in talking to witnesses who have communicated with those apparitions that are sticking around, or the mediums and psychics who seem to communicate with them, there's a pretty interesting consistency, and that is there's no consistency. Some people, apparently, who stick around as ghosts are, in fact, very afraid of what's next. Sometimes it's because they don't know if there's a heaven or hell. And in one of my cases, the witness said, the ghost says she didn't want to take a chance on that because she was afraid. So I think that's part of it. There's also those people who, when they pass, at least initially, they may be in denial that they're dead. I mean, it's kind of like somebody gets a diagnosis of having a terminal illness, and they're in denial for a little while. So that's part of it. There is a lot of evidence that shows that some of these folks stick around because of the living. They are trying to stick around and make sure that their family is okay. So they're there for us, and sometimes it's our grief, because they're ready to go, but they're like, yeah, but you're not ready to let me go, kind of thing. So there's a wide range. And then there are people who just want to stay in their house or have a good time. Actually, the have a good time has happened as well. We have one case of a haunted aircraft carrier museum, and it's only been since they actually started working on sprucing the place up for a museum that we started having encounters with apparitions that have come back to the ship to make sure that the USS Hornet, which is the ship here in the Bay Area, it's a very important ship when it comes down to our history for World War II. And it's also the ship that picked up Apollo 11 and 12. And it was going to be scrapped. And so part of what's keeping it alive, more or less, are the spirits of these sailors and officers who served aboard the ship at one time. They've kind of come back or stuck around after they've died to make sure this ship still gets attention. And it's been very, very helpful in that way. So we get a wide range. It's like the reasons are human reasons.
What do you think when they do go off into the vastness? What do you think, if you have any idea, would be where we go next? Is it because there's an idea that, you know, we're all made of this energy, and if you go through the consciousness route, that this energy just kind of goes back into the universe to be redistributed? Like, what is your outlook on this?
Well, you know, the problem with saying it gets redistributed is that mediums and others have, you know, we have some good evidence of communication after these people have died and passed on. And that can go on for a little while. I mean, it's not that, you know, we end up, I see the mediums talking to historical figures. That's kind of a, you know, a fake psychic kind of thing to bring up the ghost of Harry Houdini or something like that.
Okay.
So it may be that for a time they keep their personalities, but after time, maybe they do merge into something else, or they may be reincarnated. There's a lot of variation on belief about this, but the key term you use is consciousness, and that's what we're looking at. That our consciousness, whatever that happens to be, that's what a ghost is. It's consciousness, and what they are on the other side is still consciousness. In their communication back to us who are alive, you know, if that other world is so different that they can't even describe it in human terms, it can only be described by the medium or communicator in ways that that medium can understand. So it may just be that it's so different that these personalities have to dumb it down, basically, as they're communicating.
You know, it changes the idea that people have of this physical life that we live as being the thing, the main focus of who we are, what we are. But do you feel like the physical is just a portion of that? Almost like you see a caterpillar go in the cocoon and turn into this butterfly. And at that point, once we moved on to this other realm, we'll call it, that's like our coming out of the cocoon moment, and we actually at that point experience what it is that we're supposed to experience as energy beings. Like, how do you look at that?
Yeah, I mean, that may be one way of looking at it. Whether the question is whether it is energy or, you know, one person who is speculating about what apparitions are or what our consciousness is, that it's a quantum particle field, which would not make it energy, but it would make it still kind of the same kind of idea. We don't know exactly what makes consciousness. And even within the field of parapsychology, there are those who are very much materialists and they think it's all the brain. So they don't even look at any of this evidence we have for life after death as being evidence for life after death. They see it as evidence for other kinds of psychic experience of the living. But whether it's, you know, consciousness is energy or something else, or maybe even something, you know, a form of matter or energy that we have not even discovered in physics. You know, at this point, there's recent articles about a new state of matter that has been produced and some other combinations of things. So physics is still growing, and we're not quite at a point in our science to describe these things properly.
Wow. And you know, when we have funerals, you know, for those that pass on, we're so sad in the moment, and you know, you want to think about what happens next, because in some cases some people look at it as graduation, is like you're moving on and something you should be happy about. What do we have, you know, based on the research and I guess dealing with mediums who are reaching across and talking to some of these apparitions? What is there a general message or anything that we're getting at all from the other side, or is it more just past loved ones wanting to comfort their living relatives?
So I wouldn't say there's anything profound that comes through, that we haven't heard before. We're told that when you die, you kind of get confronted with everything you did, good and bad, in your life. And so, one medium I talked to said, so that could be hell for some people,
Yeah.
just having to go back over everything good or bad you did. Um, a lot of times, the communication that happens is for the living. It's not so much for the dead. I mean, they're off doing it, whatever it is they're doing. When I want to talk to my dad, if I could talk to him through a medium or with a medium, it's really just to kind of get that emotional hit, to kind of feel like, not that, many people know that their loved ones are still around. I mean, in some way, shape, or form. It's not even a fact to them. It's just, that's what they believe. But when they get that communication, it confirms that. It's a very emotional thing for them, and it can be very healing. The Forever Family Foundation, for example, runs several grief retreats throughout the year in different parts of the country. And these include a grief counselor, several mediums doing readings, usually someone, myself or someone else, doing some presentations about the scientific evidence and what we're doing research-wise for this. So it's a kind of a combination thing. And it's really impressive when you see people coming in grief the beginning of the weekend, and at the end of the weekend, there's significant relief. You can see that they have worked through a lot of their grief, in fact. And we have some ways of measuring that. One way it's kind of interesting is that during the meals, the first couple of meals are very quiet. People aren't talking. By the third day, which is the end, there's a lot of noise in that room. People are laughing, they're talking to each other, they're talking about their experiences, and part of this is really opening up with the mediums and opening up with each other about this. So while there are phony mediums out there who are taking advantage of people, for the most part, good mediums can significantly help with grief.
And I've seen, getting into like psychics and mediums, it's always shocking when they are able to deliver information
Yeah.
that's pertinent to your situation. It's something that's just mind blowing. Um, is there any evidence that these apparitions are just inhabiting the world as is, but maybe in a different realm, I guess is what we'll call it?
Well, we kind of look at the apparitions that stick around, the people who stick around, not the ones who are being communicated with from the other realm or the other side by mediums, but the ones who stick around are here. I mean, it's consciousness that is still here in the physical world. They're not in another dimension. They're just, present. So anyone who has a little bit of psychic ability might be able to connect with one of them. But partly psychic ability, and we're all a little bit psychic. It's just people often block stuff out. I mean, we've been taught by Western culture to not believe in this stuff so hard, and we've been educated out of this. This is why kids are more psychic. Then they lose it. They don't lose it. They're educated out of it. They're
Yes.
trained out of it. And something may happen in their lives that may bring it back, but also people can learn to bring it back as well.
Yeah, you're talking my language. I always say that on this channel all the time, that kids are born with that imagination that you have leaves you open to all the possibilities, and then
Yes.
you lose that because they put you in the system and you're in there until you wake up one day and say, hey, this, looking at from a 30,000-foot view, this is not really all that it's cracked up to be. So, and I'd like to go into that because actually we're about to take a break here in 20 seconds,
Sure.
but I wanted to also talk about the fact that I've seen you talk about all the senses that we have as human beings.
Mm-hmm.
And that's actually something I talk about too, but we'll get into that, guys. And I'm seeing your questions. You can put them up early. We will tag them for our guest here, but we will be back right after this break. Don't go anywhere. Spaced Out Radio, the After Hours Radio Show edition, filling in for Dave Scott. See you guys right after the break. All right, we are clear. We are clear. And Lloyd, we have 5 minutes. We're in front of everyone still. They can hear us. If you need to
Okay.
do anything, you have 5 minutes before we come back on.
Okay. I'll step away for a moment. I'll be right back.
Okay. And I'll take you off screen for a moment. Okay. All right, guys. Awesome stuff so far. Let me make sure I say what's up to everybody else that I missed earlier. Bob Berkins, I see you out there with the smiley face emoji. Hillbilly Herb with the Groucho Marx emoji. I'm seeing you out there. We got Big Bird saying, I think the ghosts we see are energy, not the actual dead person. The energy does not mean that person is trapped here on Earth. Their energy is not the soul. Yeah, that's a great perspective. As we try to figure this thing out, I'm sure there's a bunch of different, conclusions we could come to, and we'll be covering all that here tonight, I'm sure. Who else is coming on in? Thanks, Paramar, for putting up all the contact info as always. Appreciated. I did get a couple of your questions so far. I'll get them as I see them. If I miss them, don't get mad at me. Just go ahead and repost it so we can make sure that they get posed to the guest. Also, let's see who else has stepped on in. The Andromedan came in. We see also Blue Cruise. Blue Cruise is shown on up. Woo Riders DG. Appreciate you. Let's see. Talk to Big Bird. Who else do we have here? We have Paul Demond. Paul Demond snuck right up in here. It's good to talk. Yes, it is. And we will be doing that here tonight. T-Bone is in the building. Appreciate showing on up, T-Bone. Who else do we have? Who else snuck in? Who else came in late? I think that's about it. Okay. Yeah. So keep the questions coming, guys. I got my eyes out for them. We got a couple so far. Margaret Oliver, appreciate you coming in, saying pretty good show tonight. We do appreciate you coming on. And for anyone in here for the first time, we do this 7 days a week here on Spaced Out Radio. So Monday through Friday, normally you get Dave Scott, conductor of the Woo Train, right here, 9 p.m. Pacific until midnight. Then myself, I host the After Hours radio show on the weekends, which is Saturday and Sunday, 8 p.m. Pacific until 11. Then we have Element 115. That is currently Lee Strauss and UFO Tim James. And that's Fridays, 8 p.m. Pacific until 9 p.m. Pacific. And yeah, 7 days a week, you find something going on right here on this channel. So make sure you lock us in. Hit the subscribe if you wouldn't mind. That'd be great. Also hit the notification bell so you know when we go live, because we go live a lot here on this channel. Let's see. Other than that, Crude Red has stepped on in from Vernal, Utah, and we have we're on the radio out there in Vernal as well as few other markets. One day, what I'll do is I'll set up a show where we'll broadcast one of the live radio shows. So those who haven't tuned in to radio, you can see the show it comes across different. It's just a different feeling when you listen to it on radio. But we'll have to do that one day. And let's see, who else do we have out here? I think we are looking good. Remember, super chats are open on this channel. It's a great way to support Spaced Out Radio. We'd appreciate it if you would consider doing so at any time. Let's see. Got about a minute and a half before we come back from break here. Also, since we do have a minute left, if you wouldn't mind, let's take one moment to go right under the video and hit the like button. Just hit the like button or the dislike button, depending on how you feel about the show tonight. Either one does something to the algorithm, kind of make sure the show gets out there. And that's what we're trying to do, is build things, raise the bar here at Spaced Out Radio all the time. So if you wouldn't mind taking a moment to go ahead, get those likes up. And let's get over 100 this show if we can. That would be awesome. And Let's see, T-Bone chiming in saying, fantastic first half hour. That's went by really quick too. As I imagine, so will most of this conversation here tonight. Okay, yep, you got the Amazon store up for our guest, Loyd Auerbach. We'll get into talking about some of the books and stuff here tonight as well. But appreciate you putting all that information up there, Paramarv. All right, 5 seconds. Bring our guest back up, and here we go. All right, everybody, welcome back. Spaced Out Radio, the After Hours radio show. We are on the back half of hour number 1. Here with our guest, Loyd Auerbach. He is a paranormal research investigator, also an author. We're going to go over a lot of that stuff here tonight. Make sure you don't go anywhere. And if you miss any of the conversation, jump in the archives. Absolutely free. YouTube.com/Spaced Out Radio. As we go ahead and get right back into the conversation here tonight. So, Lloyd, and I definitely want to get into some of your research, but has there been, over the time that you've done this, has there been any sort of commonalities that you have noticed in, when you go from haunting to haunting, or I don't know if you even call it that, but when a apparition occupies a certain space?
Yeah, I mean the commonalities. There's different commonalities. First of all, there's different labels or models of what's going on. So we use the term apparition for a conscious entity versus a haunting, or what they use on a lot of the TV shows is residual haunting, where you see a figure and the figure does exactly the same thing at 3 p.m. every day or every other day. Those are recordings. They are imprints in the environment that we're sensitive enough to pick up psychically. And those are not necessarily recordings of dead people, because living people leave the impressions behind and then eventually they die. And so after their death, you'll still pick it up. But hauntings are typically place related. Apparitions are not locked to a place any more than we are. I mean, you could say I'm in my house. I have a home office here. I pretty much haunt my house. So, haunting is a place and an apparition is a person in that respect. So the models we actually have been played out over the years. There's some factors around apparitions that kind of cut through some of the folklore based on the research that's been done by many others before me and continue with myself and some colleagues. And that includes that people don't see apparitions with their eyes. Apparitions are not optical phenomena. They don't give off light or reflect light. That's why you can't photograph them normally. We pick up things with our psychic abilities, our extrasensory or non-sensory perception, and our brains give us a visual signal or an auditory one. Some people, you can have cases, and I've had cases where one person sees the ghost and hears the ghost talking, someone else hears the voice, and someone else smells their perfume or cologne. And then there's other people in the room who are like, you people are crazy. There's nothing here. So it varies from person to person.
Okay. Wrapping my mind around that. So what is a shadow person considered an apparition or anything in that realm?
Well, we'd have to kind of find out what the experience actually was. And people say they have a shadow person experience, because a lot of it comes from video and usually night shot video or pictures they're taking. And we don't count those as experiences. Photographic evidence is not really good evidence for a lot of reasons. When a person sees a shadow, we've had cases again where someone sees a shadowy figure, but someone next to them is seeing a fully formed human being. And that tells me, and this goes back in time for us in our field, that tells me the person who's seeing the shadow, their reception's not good. They're not, if they're getting, static and snow instead of the actual picture in that respect. Okay. So a lot of times it's not about the apparition, the entity, it's about the person receiving the signal and how we process the information in that perceptual process we have.
Okay, and then I heard you state earlier that you were describing these apparitions or spirits to literally still cohabitate the same dimension that we live in, and
Yeah.
they're not necessarily in this other dimension. So could you kind of explain that a little bit? Because the question, and maybe this can, bring it in. The question I really had about that is when we are, but I guess you kind of just described it. When we're seeing these things, are they peering into where we are, or are we peering into where they are?
Well, first let's think about how an apparition or a consciousness without a body could actually see you. And the answer to that is they don't have eyes. They can't hear you because they don't have eardrums that react. They have no physical senses. So it becomes, again, non-sensory perception. They are perceiving the world directly. That's what ESP is. Extrasensory perception is not an extra sense. It's not a sixth sense, because senses require a physical structure in the body. ESP works with consciousness. It's consciousness directly picking things up. So imagine, and I have to always point to Star Trek for this. There have been plenty of episodes of the original series, and since that time, with energy beings, in some respects, who can project themselves as looking like people. And what they're doing is putting out a signal, and we're picking up the signal. One of the real interesting commonalities of apparition experiences, even those when people see someone who has just died, is that the apparitions are, number one, wearing clothing, which should not be the case if we're just, we should be in our birthday suits when we're dead. So they're wearing clothing, and they often look healthier than when they died and younger than when they died. So it's not uncommon for someone who dies at age 95 of natural causes to show up and say goodbye to relatives looking like that guy was in his 35 years old and in his prime in that respect. Because we all, as living people, have a self-image. We think of ourselves a certain way. I mean, older guys like myself, I'm still 30 in my head.
Yeah, me too.
My beard and my hair is dark. In fact, I have more hair on my head. So I know that when I die, if I show up to anybody, I'm going to be looking, slick at 30. That's going to be fine. So it's about our self-image. And the other interesting pattern that's shown up is that many apparitions are only seen to right above or right below the knee, not all the way to their feet. Interestingly enough, and I've done this for years when I used to lecture on the college circuit, and I would ask students to close their minds and picture themselves, and without telling them any of this about the knee thing, and then ask just as a survey, how many of you saw yourself all the way down to your feet? And it was no more than 5% in any audience.
Wow.
Everybody else was around the knee. And then when I asked that 5%, how many of you 5%ers, how many of you buy a lot of shoes? And I'd say that 4 out of 5 of them spent a lot of money on shoes, which meant that was part of their identity, the clothing.
Do you get at all into the idea of reincarnation?
I teach these courses, including one on evidence for survival of bodily death, and that definitely goes into the reincarnation piece. The University of Virginia, the Division of Perceptual Studies, they have been doing research on children who remember previous lives since 1960. That's kind of like the main place in the world that does this kind of research. And they have thousands of cases. A large percentage of them are kids who can give enough information that the researchers can track down the previous personality. And sometimes that child can even take a researcher or a family member to the home of the previous personality and encounter the family of that person who died, which is a really interesting follow-up piece of it. They tend to be people who died tragically, so in accidents or violently they were killed. And the median age or median time between the death of the previous personality and the conception of the new one is about 15 months, about a year, a little over a year for that. There are some longer term cases which go back decades, but for the most part, it's very close in time, but not necessarily close in geography at all, which is also interesting for that. So imagine talking to a 3-year-old who's talking suddenly like an adult and talking about their my other parents were a lot nicer to me because they let me read, or just all of a sudden that it would have to be very jarring for people, especially with certain cultural or religious backgrounds.
Yeah, kids that do that, I might have to put them. They might. I don't know what I would do. It wouldn't be nice though. It probably wouldn't be nice.
Well, sadly, some of those kids have been put through, I want to say, hell, because their parents felt that they were possessed instead of a reincarnation, because they didn't believe in reincarnation. And that could, there have been kids who have died because of deliverance ceremonies or lay exorcism, not by the Catholic Church, but otherwise.
Yeah, I can bet, definitely. So, what happens in this instance then? If you were to describe your idea of reincarnation, then what happens? So, at death, this previous person's the apparition spirit lives on, and then do you think it inhabits a new body, or what do you think happens there?
Well, that's really the question. It's definitely a lot of memories for sure. And part of this is there's models of memory, of human memory, that our memory is not even in our heads. Our memory is like in the cloud, more or less. So some of the more materialist people think it's not the soul or consciousness being reborn. Somehow the memories are being planted or being absorbed by someone. That's one idea. Another idea is it is the spirit because of how they died. They feel, there's something that allows them, just like something allows them to stick around as a ghost, as an apparition. There's something, maybe it's a spiritual plan, maybe it's just, it could be the environment. There's a lot of factors we still haven't figured out as to why and exactly what's happening. The other interesting thing is with these kids, typically the memories go away by about age 6. So it's as the person's growing and as their own personality starts asserting itself. So there's some real commonalities here, but we just don't know exactly what it is. But sadly, it's one of the few things that has so much evidence and is so interesting. Even if you don't assume reincarnation, I think it's a scientific crime that mainstream science is ignoring this completely.
Yeah,
because maybe it's not reincarnation, it's something else altogether. But you would think that something like that would have to be interesting to people.
Yeah, definitely. And just as you were saying earlier, because I had this whole idea, I was thinking of how could a kid, be able to do that? And if we were thinking outside of reincarnation, are they essentially just tapping in, as you said, the memory maybe not being localized in the head, and they're just tapping into information from someone's past life, and they're kind of regurgitating it, almost like a medium channeling information from it. So could that be the case that they're experiencing some type of like mediumship in that moment?
Well, this is where we get into some of the discussion, let's call it that, between myself and my colleagues and some of the other folks, is that some of them think that's exactly what's happening. That's a form of ESP, and it's sometimes called super ESP or super psi. And it's just really weird. Honestly, it'd be really weird for this kid to only tap into one person's memories, past memories. That doesn't fit in anything else we know about for psychic abilities. It doesn't fit into any, especially when that personality has no connection to them. Maybe if it was a family member, that might be something, but it just doesn't make any sense, at least as far as we know right now. So
there's another phenomenon that is just as puzzling, and I was thinking or wondering if the two might be related. The fact that kids are able to have this past life information, and then you have a situation where a kid or an adult has some sort of traumatic event, and then like a coma, for instance, and they come out of that speaking a totally different language. Just somehow have grabbed that information from somewhere and is utilizing it.
And it's really interesting, especially that's called xenoglossy. It's happened with a few kids in the reincarnation cases. One of the mediums for the Forever Family Foundation, Janet Mayer, a number of years ago was doing some mediumship stuff, and all of a sudden she starts speaking this language. And it's just like she goes into a more or less an altered state, and she's just continuing to speak this stuff out there. And it had a particular cadence, so people did recognize it as a language. But for months and months and months, she had it recorded. She sent recordings, tape recordings, over to linguistic anthropology, to people around the country, to linguists. Nobody could identify the language. She felt it really was a language. Finally, one professor at a university in the DC area, DC, Maryland area, identified it as Yanomami. They are a small tribe in the Amazon forest. They're still not, they're still fairly primitive. Anthropologists have been in contact with them for decades. And apparently no one except this one guy could even understand Yanomami at all in the United States. So it's not like she could have gotten it from anywhere. When it was translated, apparently the wording indicated it was the spirit of a shaman who was giving warnings about what's happening to the planet. Wow. And concerns about that. Over time, she's continued to do that, but then it turned out in the last few years, other languages have come through, which ended up being other South American primitive tribal languages that took a long time to be identified. There's no way Janet could possibly have heard that language, let alone absorbed it in some way. So it seems that when you're open to that kind of channeling, people will come in. And she's a medium, so it made perfect sense that that happened. And that may happen with some of these other folks as well, that the other language might be connecting with the spirit like a medium does. And that's coming through in that way.
If you could, it would be cool to hear you talk about the many senses that we potentially have as human beings, because I think that plays into a lot of getting through. And one thing I normally say all the time is common sense is one of the biggest ones that we have.
One of my late colleagues would always say that the most important tool in a ghost hunter's toolkit is common sense.
That's what I'm talking.
And I would absolutely agree with that. Yeah. I honestly, I think the other one is sense of humor. I think that's also important too. So as I mentioned a little while ago, when we talk about senses, we're talking about, the five senses. There's actually more than five senses right off the bat, because we have one sense of sight, we have one sense of smell, we have one sense of hearing, we have multiple senses of taste. There's five senses of taste based on the different taste buds that we have, like sweet and sour. We have multiple senses of touch. So we have different sensors. Our skin is our biggest sensory organ. People forget about that. People think of touch, they think of, touching things. But we have heat sensors, or hot and cold. We have pressure sensors. We have pain sensors. All of that are nerve endings, and that's all part of our sensory organ that is touch. There's other indications that we may have a magnetic sense, the ability to kind of somehow perceive the Earth's magnetic field and its shifting. There are those people who know true magnetic north, when where that is all the time. Pigeons and sharks navigate by electromagnetic fields. So it's not uncommon in the animal world, and it seems to be something that we can do as well. And then there's other researchers looking at the senses that have indicated that there's other forms of sense that we have, including things like a sense of time, the sense of duration. That's our body clock. And one listing of other senses, which was pretty interesting, was this researcher talked about a sense of beat. He called it the sense of beat. So your sense of rhythm, basically, with that. And we know some people have it and some people don't. So there's different ways, because we see the body reacting in different ways. And we get data, not just from our senses, we get data in a lot of different ways that comes in, not beyond the five senses for things. So we perceive things. The perceptual process is taking all that data that comes in through the senses and then making sense of it, basically creating a picture in our heads, filtering it out. We don't consciously see everything our eyes are seeing. In fact, one thing I always have to point out to everybody is you don't see a black dot floating around in front of you, but every one of our eyes has a spot at the back of the eye called the blind spot. That's where the optic nerve hits the back of the eye, and no light triggers anything there. So technically there should be a black dot floating around, but our perceptual process fills in the blank. With our sense of hearing, we get used to background noise, thankfully, and we can somehow screen it out. We definitely do that with our sense of smell. We get used to certain smells that, people say, how can you live here? It stinks. It's like, I didn't notice it. So it's our perceptual process actually allows us to consciously attend to things, even though there's a lot more data coming in. And when you get other signals through non-sensory means, basically psychic means, you're adding more information to what you're getting through your normal senses, and you will then see it or hear it or feel it in some way, like you would if it was coming through your normal senses in that way.
And I call those senses superpowers. I tell everybody that all the time. I say, these are our superpowers, like just the intuition, the gut feeling,
Right.
the common sense, all those things. And so we
Well,
know
yeah,
they're being suppressed.
And speaking of superpowers, there are people who have learned to do what bats do, sonar.
Oh, yeah.
So there are additional things we can, if we were capable of spending time doing this, we could learn all sorts of things about other ways we could pick up information from the environment.
Yeah, just to kind of add to that, I have a friend who his little brother was nationally known as the kid who could ride his bike and use sonar, clicking.
Oh, really?
And could ride his bike successfully. And then, but unfortunately, he passed away a few years back. But he was on Oprah, all these big shows. But yeah, that's definitely something that we see when we lose a sense. We tend to strengthen other senses. And so, with an understanding of that, because I would think that in this field, being in touch with those senses and aware that you do have these others is something that's beneficial or helpful. How does that help you out when you're out in the field? Just that knowledge of knowing that we have all these other senses.
Well, you mentioned I was also a mentalist, psychic entertainer, and I got into magic because of my parapsychology degree program. We had a course taught by a local magician. It was mainly teaching us about psychic fraud, but as I got more and more into the magic and then mentalism world, I learned so much about how people can conclude that something is paranormal or supernatural because they are mislabeling something that they have perceived. An illusion of, you might say, auditory or otherwise. We don't always know. One of the things that I'm constantly having a battle against the ghost hunting world is all the TV shows have them investigating in the dark. We don't, in the field of parapsychology, investigate in the dark unless that's the only condition under which somebody has experienced something, which is almost never the case. And that's partly because of, number one, safety, but also because we know from studies, and I know from performing phony seances for fun shows, we know from those things, in the dark, we are terrible perceivers. We can't tell where a sound actually comes from, which is really weird when you think about it. I mean, we don't need our sight to hear, but we rely on sight to kind of guide us with things like that. So we're terrible in the dark because we rely so heavily on sight. People who are blind, not a problem for them. So because that's the world they live in. But it's one of the things that I've learned over the years is how much people make mistakes in their perceptions and labeling their experiences. So when we go into an investigation, I find out every little thing that they think is the ghost or the poltergeist or the haunting or whatever else it is. And then one by one, we go through looking for normal explanations or different explanations than a psychic or paranormal one. And most of the time, there's very few of my cases where there wasn't a percentage, and sometimes a big percentage, of things, of events they reported or experiences they had that did not have an explanation. And it's often misinterpretation. That's all it is. And sometimes it's because they don't know any better. Nobody taught them that if you live near a landfill, then methane gas could seep up into your house, and it'll smell like sulfur.
We're going to get into some more of this conversation right after the break, guys, with Loyd Auerbach. It's going to be awesome. Don't go anywhere.
Listening to After Hours with Mr. Rob G on the only place where you can own the night. Spaced Out Radio.
Spaced Out Radio. You've tuned your dial to the right frequency.
All right, we are clear, and Lloyd will be off camera for the next 5 minutes. So
Okay.
I'll see you back here in just a moment.
Okay, sounds good.
All right, later. All right, everybody, welcome back. Spaced Out Radio after hour number 2, as we have about 30 seconds before we come back from radio break. I just want to make sure that you guys know this is the hour for your questions. Please, I've been tagging them and keep posing those questions so I can pose them to the guests this hour. Should be fantastic. Time is flying by as well. And definitely glad you guys joined us here tonight. We got about 10 seconds here. Bring our guests back up here. All right. And we have about 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. Let's go. All right, everybody. Welcome back. Spaced Out Radio, the After Hours Radio Show edition. Means I'm filling in for Dave Scott tonight. This is Mr. Rob G. We've been having a fantastic conversation so far with Loyd Auerbach here, talking parapsychology, apparitions, all sorts of things. If you miss any of the show tonight, make sure you hop in our archives. I will always tell you they're absolutely free. youtube.com/@spacedoutradio as we get back into the show here. And so I did have a question going into this. So when you go into an investigation, what does your team consist of? And then, like, what are some of the prerequisites that you guys may have in order to take on a case?
Well, first, let's start with the prerequisites first. The case has to have current activity. Frankly, most of the cases I've done have been residences or businesses. They have not been public places. I'm not a paranormal tourist. I have worked with places like the USS Hornet, Aircraft Museum, then a couple of restaurants here in the Bay Area and a couple of places in other parts of the country. But that was because the owners were curious or want to know a little bit more about what was going on with things. For residences, it's really, when was the last time you had an experience? I have gotten calls over the years or emails where, they saw a ghost or they thought they saw a ghost. It's like, when did you see the ghost? A year ago. Have you seen anything since then? No. Then how do you know the ghost is still there? I mean, it has to be active in that way. Otherwise, there's really nothing to do more than interview the person over the phone. No reason to go out there. That's number one. Number two, logistics are important. We're not funded, so I'm not flying around the country to go to somebody's house. I'm going to try to get some of my former students, because I've trained a lot of people over the years, or colleagues, to actually do the cases there themselves. But also, there's one important factor. Very honestly, it's in the pre-interview. I find out, number one, if they are insistent that it is a demon or they have an idea and they won't even consider alternatives. That's difficult for us to deal with. And the other is, are you okay knowing that we're going to come in and try to figure out, not debunk the thing, but try to figure out what possible normal explanations there might be for everything, if that's what's going on, but also for just part of the case. And I've had people say, no, it's absolutely blah, blah, blah. It's absolutely this. It's like, we have to look for normal explanations first. I'm not saying you're stupid. I'm not saying it's just that people sometimes don't have the knowledge to understand certain things and they make mistakes. It's normal. It's human. We can't touch those cases, because if we do go and we find out there's nothing going on, those people are going to keep looking for somebody who will tell them their place is haunted. That's what's going to happen. It's a waste of time for them. As far as a team, I just need one person to go with me. I mean, I have worked with occasionally, depending on the case, we try not to overwhelm the family with too many people. Usually I do work with a psychic or medium. I have one in particular I work with these days. I've worked with others in the past. And it just really depends on what kind of case it is. But it's not like the TV shows where we have like a specialist in equipment and a specialist in this, or, we don't work that way. We certainly don't deal with demon stuff, because that's religion. That's not science.
And I like that. And that one person that you bring on is the psychic medium.
Usually, yeah. So if I'm going to go with somebody else, if it's just two of us, it's going to be myself and a psychic medium typically. I will bring other people who have trained or who are students of mine currently. I don't just take spectators with us to a residential case.
Yeah. And I've always felt like, especially in paranormal, like the psychic medium is like key to communicate with the other side, so you
Yes.
get understanding what it is
Yes.
you're doing. And I like the fact that you actually try to go ahead and explain away, prosaic explanations. If there is an explanation for it, then let's hear it, and that
Yeah.
let it solve that instead of dwelling on something that isn't, right? So I like that.
We kind of have to do that in order to study the stuff we want to study. I mean, it's what we do in the laboratory too. And with ESP experiments, you have to set up an experiment so that there's no possibility the person could ever know or even guess at what the target is, because otherwise, how do we know it's ESP? How do we even study that?
Yeah, and I want to show you something. It's always, anytime I have a paranormal researcher here, investigator, I want to present this to you because I've had some weird things happen to me here. I'm not at home now, but in the house that I live in, everyone here is aware of it. I've been able to show them physical proof of what it is. I just want to see how you would approach this investigation. So I have, I'm going to attempt to find the shadow person here. I have a picture that was taken in my house. I'll bring it up in a moment. Fully defined shadow person in the hallway. Okay, so that's one thing. Another thing is we had this weird lady just show up at our house, at our front door. We're like 4 houses off the corner. Middle of the day, she knocks on the door and asks to come in the house and take a shower. And so we're like, wow, that's kind of weird. So we have that. We have the shadow person. We have footsteps on the roof, full footsteps in the middle of the night, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. We also, and this is, we also have phantom knocking. So literally knocking, just clear as this, no one there. So if this is the evidence that I have and I bring that to you, how would you approach that investigation? Is there more that you would need? Is that the perfect amount of information, or how would you approach that?
We'd want to be on site. As far as the knockings and the footsteps, especially the footsteps, I've had cases where I had one case early on where you could clearly hear footsteps coming from the attic above, and it turned out the acoustics of the attic were amplifying a squirrel pushing a nut across a rough floor.
Oh, okay.
We've had here where I live occasionally had footsteps on the roof. We have wild turkeys, and sometimes they actually fly up on the roof. Raccoons. So animals can cause things, plus the acoustics of the building. The knocking can happen because, depending on the timing it's happening, it can happen sometimes because of house settling. That can sometimes come across as knocking. I'd want to look at that as a possibility. It's not the answer because I'd have to check the location. Same thing for any of these. These are only possible normal explanations. It's pretty rare for an actual ghost to do knocking or to have footsteps. Now, hauntings, on the other hand, are things that kind of are recordings, and that could actually be something that's going on, but you can't take a tape recorder or an audio recorder and record those things because they're not physical sounds. They're also us being psychic. So if it's physical sounds, we look normally first for normal explanations, and then we would consider what else is going on or if there's more to it than that. The lady coming to your door, I'm not even going to comment on that.
Yeah, just a lady that showed up. Yeah.
I mean, if she was like she suddenly disappeared in front of you, that'd be a different story. But
well, here's what part I didn't tell you. This part I should have told you this. So I'm thinking it's weird. I'm like, that's weird. Why would she come up to this house? And I'm like, okay, did she come to the neighbor first? And then when she left here, did she go to this neighbor? And I wanted to check on the online and see. I checked the Ring camera. We have them. We have 2 in the front of the house, 1 on the driveway, 1 in the walkway. And we did not get her picked up on camera walking to the door or leaving from the house. Nothing recorded her. Now that was the incident, and I can't believe I didn't say that part, but yeah, that was the thing.
Yeah, so now that might have been an apparition. I mean, it's possible that was an apparition. I can tell you that there was a case years ago that I looked into. In fact, it was something we ended up discussing. I was on Oprah once back in late 80s, and it was about this case. And part of the case involved a couple. It was a very famous case in the 80s because this couple had started digging. They were in a new development in Texas, and they started digging a swimming pool, and bodies fell out, like in the movie Poltergeist, because the developer had not moved the potter's field, had just moved the tombstones. And so there's a lawsuit that goes on. The couple actually ended up getting other neighbors involved and paying for identification of the remains and then moving them to be reburied. When that happened, and people had had a few really interesting experiences before that, but when that happened, this couple says that there's a knock at their back door. They open it up. There's a man standing there who just looks at them very, very calmly and says, "I want to thank you so much for what you've done for us." And then he disappears. So, that and a couple of other experiences were very much about saying thank you for this kind of thing. So we have experiences like this that can happen. As far as a shadow picture, shadow person, here's the thing, that these things cannot show up on camera unless the entity themselves or one of us living folks affects the camera or the film or the recording media. They don't reflect light. They don't give off light. There's no special camera that can detect things that are not optical. But just like human beings can affect physical things, we have a lot of data in the lab that living people can affect electronic devices, computers and things like that. So we assume that dead people can do that too. And a camera is just that kind of thing. It could be affected that way. It just may be that whoever was affecting the camera, in this case, again, could not get a really good picture going.
Yeah, okay. And so, there are a lot of, here's what I'll say. There are definitely some groups out there that research the paranormal that could have flipped that and turned that into something very sensationalist.
Oh, yeah,
right?
yeah, because they don't ask questions. They just go with what they see on TV.
And so what is that? Okay, because I'm seeing, when I watch these shows on TV, I'm seeing them going to buildings with these EMF detectors and these boxes. And do you use any of those tools? And kind of what are your thoughts about that?
So things like EMF sensors and temperature sensors, those are used to see what's going on in the environment, preferably when people are seeing a ghost and when they're not. In other words, we're looking to see if there's any changes in the environment when people have a psychic experience, a paranormal experience. We are not using these devices to detect ghosts at all, because there's no such thing as a ghost detector other than a human being, maybe a couple animals here and there. But these pieces of equipment, ever since the ghost hunting equipment, which was, by the way, required by TV producers to have devices because it's more interesting. TV is a visual medium. The more noises they make, the more beeps they make, the more lights they make, all of that is better for television. You would never have seen a ghost hunting group ever doing investigation in the dark until after night shot cameras were invented. That did not happen. Plenty of TV before that. They couldn't turn out the lights because TV is a visual medium. So much of what's on television, these shows, was produced or directed by producers, not by investigators. And a lot of folks who build things have taken advantage of them, either building new devices which don't or cannot do what they claim they do, or they have repackaged things. Like one of the more famous cases of that is somebody taking the little cat motion detector balls that light up when a cat plays with them.
Yes.
And repackaging them as ghost detectors and charging a lot more money for them.
Yeah.
There's a common device called a REM pod, which has an antenna on it. It has lights on it. The casing is more expensive than the actual guts, which are basically a cheap theremin kit. A theremin is a musical instrument that works off electromagnetic fields. That's what's inside, like a $20, $30 theremin kit in this $180 device. So there's a whole market out there. We don't use that stuff the same way. We have again, we're looking at the physical environment when somebody has an experience. That's important to us.
Wow. So how does it feel? Obviously, probably know the answer because it's the same within the UFO community. But when you have those out there, those over embellishers, and they kind of muddy up the water for real research and kind of block the way, roadblocks to getting to actual answers, like, is that something that you combat while you're in the field, or how do you separate the two? Because I feel like they shouldn't be allowed to intermingle with those who are doing actual research.
Well, the problem there's two problems. Number one, there's more cases than there possibly are researchers because there's not a lot of funding in this field. So that's number one. Um, Number two, the TV shows what they've done is basically say that anybody can go out and do this with this equipment. Anybody. Like you don't have any educational background, you don't have to do anything. You can get all excited about that sort of thing. So there's this kind of idea of it's a hobbyist thing. It's a thrill seeker. They want to get their EVPs. They want to do whatever it is, their evidence. But most of these folks have no curiosity about how this works, what's going on, the science behind it. They just pay attention to the paranormal celebrities on TV and follow whatever show it is. That's a large percentage of them. There are those that actually realize when they start doing investigating that way that they need to learn more, and they end up coming to folks in our field, taking our courses at the Rhine Center, reading actual books by people who have been doing this for a while. One of the most telling things I have to say, back in 2008, I was at a conference on a panel, and one of the main people on the TV show Ghost Hunters, who was on the panel with me, stood up and said that there was no literature, any significant literature on this subject of the paranormal, investigating before the 1990s. And the field's been around since the late 1800s. That was about the most ignorant thing that anybody could possibly say, especially somebody who is putting themselves out as an authority from a TV show. But then again, they were just plumbers when they got started. So,
yeah. And I know that makes your blood boil because I feel the same way in the UFO community. It's the same situation. It's everything. The Bigfoot community, we all have the same issue here. When we man, it's a roadblock in getting to the answers. But some of your books that you've written shows here in your bio: a paranormal casebook, ESP Wars, psychic dreaming. So as far as psychic dreaming, are you talking remote viewing? Are you talking astral traveling?
Well, yeah. So first, ESP Wars is all about the U.S. government and Soviet government's remote viewing programs. That's a history of those.
Okay.
The main author on ESP Wars, Edwin C. May, was the program director of Stargate for over 10 years.
Wow.
And Joe McMoneagle, who's one of the authors as well, one of my co-authors, actually was the #1 viewer for the Army project. So that's all about that. We actually had contributions from the Russians as well. Psychic dreaming is about having a psychic experience in the dream state. So it does cover out-of-body experiences, which people like to call astral travel. It does cover visitation dreams, where people have a dream that seems very, very real of a deceased relative having a communication with them.
Mm-hmm.
We also cover a big section of it is precognitive dreams, dreaming of the future, which, by the way, for the most part, when people have dreams of the future, they're not disasters. They're like really minor things that happen the next day at work or in the family. It's really kind of bizarre how normal those dreams tend to be, but they're very predictive of things that you can avoid also, which is kind of the cool thing. And then it also covers mutual dreaming, when people have dreams together about things, but not specifically. I mean, remote viewing is a special case of real-time or precognitive ESP in that way.
Do you feel like, in bringing up Stargate, because when I look at that, I look at a government that obviously understands that human beings are capable of doing more than we fully understand.
Part of the government, not the government. Yeah,
part of the government. Yeah. Now, do you think there's a part of the government that understands more about the other side, like just the whole scope? Because I think in some ways, a lot of these things we ask questions about might interconnect with each other on some level.
Well, the whole life after death thing apparently was of no interest to anybody in the government agencies that were working with the Stargate folks. Not at all. They were not. They were interested in practical applications. So, and at that point, that program got started because the Russians were doing psychic stuff, and our government, the CIA especially, got really a little bit out of sorts. Like, well, if they can do psychic spying from a distance, we better do something too. So that's really how that all got started. But the idea, mediumship doesn't have the kind of practical governmental psychic spying intelligence kind of application, unless you happen to have somebody on the other side who is spying for you. And that I haven't heard of that happening at this point. So, I mean, while there are people who are within the government who, because there are people working at various labs who have an interest in this, and they might be doing some research. It's not really a government thing, pretty much anywhere to look at life after death.
And the reason why I even bring that up, because I think it would have some sort of social implication.
Oh, social, yeah, definitely social implications, yeah.
Yes, because if someone realizes that, okay, yeah, we just go on after death, then that changes the paradigm as far as how people handle themselves within life, which could be a threat to the power structure that be, or there could be other ways that could go.
Well, generally, the threat is not against the governments. The threat is against religion.
Okay.
That. Yeah, it's not about that piece of it. It is a social belief thing, but there's enough people who are pure materialists that do not believe in that at all. And even within my field, they'll look at the evidence for reincarnation. These kids, they look at the evidence that we gather for mediumship, for everything else, and they say, well, here's another interpretation that has nothing to do with that. One of my late colleagues mentioned that the idea of life after death or survival of bodily death, it may not be something we can ever really prove. We can get enough evidence that we can say that that's likely to happen until you die. In that case, you'll only know if you're right. You'll never know if you're wrong.
Yeah. And I was going to ask you that, because it's like, okay, you spend your life researching, and like, what are the things that you hope? The ultimate thing would be to have that answer, but what do you beneath that, since that wouldn't be a reality until you passed over? What things or checkpoints are you trying to accomplish before you hang it all up?
Well, it'd be great to get, and this is part of educating the public. One of the reasons I'm out there doing this, I've been doing it for so long from an educational, one of the reasons I do media so much, and I've done so much over the years, is getting people to admit their interest, because the fact is that the so-called mainstream of science that says this stuff doesn't exist is a really small percentage of people in the United States or in other countries. It's really small. Their opinions, because they're dealing with established science or sciences that have practical applications. We have practical applications too, but there's a huge social element, and the what we call pseudo skeptics, the disbelievers, who's been really outspoken about it, and people on the religious side also pushing away from it too. Part of this is if the general public just fessed up publicly about their interest and supported the idea of doing research on these subjects, we would be a lot further along. It's very hard. There's very few funding sources. It's very hard for folks in academics. So at most universities, it's getting better again, but it's been very toxic in academics locations. So colleges and universities in the US and parts of Canada and other places in the Western world. UK is fine. They've been kind of dealing with it a little differently, but you have people who can't even talk to others in their department that they are interested in this subject for fear of being either fired or censured, or something has happened. And that certainly has happened with UFOs. I was at Northwestern when J. Allen Hynek was there, and even volunteered at the Center for UFO Studies. And he was very popular on campus. He was the head of the astronomy department. But years later, I got very mad, I don't know, several years ago, when I read an editorial or an interview with the former dean of the College of Arts and Sciences in the Skeptical Inquirer. And this guy was saying how he didn't think that Hynek was a good scientist, and went on and on about this stuff. It's like, dude, you had Hynek do the opening lecture to every freshman class. It was like, this is ridiculous. I mean, that he would never have said that while Hynek was alive at any point. And it just has been very difficult. So part of it is that's what we're fighting against, is trying to get people to recognize that people have these experiences. You guys can't ignore them just because you think they're impossible.
That is awesome. A good way to take us into our final break with our guest here, Loyd Auerbach. Having a really great conversation, guys. Like I said, if you missed any of it, you know what to do. Hop on the archive. youtube.com/spacedoutradio. We'll be back with your questions right after this break. All right. Awesome stuff, Lloyd. Awesome stuff. We have 5 minutes here. So if you need to do anything.
No, I'm good. Unless my cats bother me, I'm pretty good.
Yeah. Yeah, we got some good questions coming up here. Linda says, love this. That is awesome. Yes, I do as well. And let's see.
I was looking here. It says, what is Lloyd's most prized action figure? That's a good question.
Yeah, if you want to answer it.
That one there.
Let me bring you up on the screen here.
Here. This character right here, that's the Shadow.
Oh, okay.
And then who knows what evil lurks in the hearts of men. That's my most prized action figure. That one, and then I have one off to the side on a high shelf that a friend of mine who used to work for Industrial Light and Magic actually took another figure and doctored it up so it looks like me. And I have him sitting at the desk with Space Ghost. So it's Space Ghost, Ghost to Coast, who's interviewing the Loyd Auerbach action figure. Yeah.
That is awesome. That is awesome. Awesome stuff. I saw that question earlier. I don't know. Did I tag that? Yeah, I sure did. It was Hillbilly Herb. What is Lloyd's most prized?
Yeah.
So Hillbilly Herb, there's your answer. And let's see. Anyone else with questions? I got a couple here. Let's go ahead and get them out. Just put them in caps. I would appreciate that. Let's see. Anyone else out here? Okay, nope. It looks like we got it.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure about this question. Does the guest have any receipts on the phenomena he experienced? So I'm not quite sure what receipts means.
Just any evidence, like photos for instance, let me show you mine. So this is what we call a receipt, like something like this that just kind of catalog.
Yeah, I see that. Yeah.
So yeah, just any sort of data you may have captured along these, investigations. And let's see. So yeah, a shadow person, phantom knocking, footsteps on the roof. A lot of weird stuff at this house. This house also saw 47 UFOs in the middle of the day.
Wow.
All disappeared into thin blue sky. Crazy. Orbs, floating orbs.
Yeah, orbs are not anything. They have nothing to do with ghostly stuff at all.
Okay. What do you think those are?
Most orbs, well, first of all, most of them are not visible. If they're visible, they may very well be ball lightning or earth lights, which are a physical phenomena that have nothing to do with the psychic world. In general, the orb phenomena in photos are almost all exclusively photographic issues. And the person who named them and who promoted that back in the 1980s, a guy named Dave Oster, had no good evidence that orbs were spirits whatsoever.
Okay, I know exactly what you're talking about. This is what I filmed. Let's see.
But there are I've seen video of earth lights. I mean, there was a whole study of plasma effects, which are generally created by certain minerals in the earth and static electricity. And they're pretty cool when you see them.
Take a look at this.
All right, so that's a security camera. That is most likely. There's a lot of reasons why that could be, that have nothing to do with the paranormal at all.
Okay, what would you say that was? Because I'm open to all interpretation.
Well, it almost looks like it's a little slow. Is that the proper speed?
Yes, we have I think I come in, or my girl comes in the room during this video. So you can see this is an
insect. That probably is an insect.
Okay, and
the problem with night shot camera is that insects and dust reflect infrared, because remember, there's an infrared light that is going across, and that will doesn't show the proper shape. It's not processed properly. Let's put it that way.
Okay, this is a little closer to the camera.
I mean, that almost looks like somebody's pointing a light at something.
And this is completely dark room. No one's in this. This is our side house. So
again, there's nothing that would indicate that that's a ghost at all.
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out.
It most likely it could have been a moth or something like that. I've seen actual attempts to recreate some of these things with insects of different types, and it, depending on the camera and the type of sensor it's got, it can look very, very different from camera to camera with the exact same insect.
Yeah. And it was definitely triggered. So the video started recording each and every time, as we got about 10 seconds left coming back from the break. All right, everybody, welcome back. Spaced Out Radio, the After Hours Radio Show. We are on the back half of the hour 2 with 20 minutes left with our guest here, Loyd Auerbach. Time has flown tonight. Oh my God. Make sure that you get your questions in. I have a couple that I'm going to bring up right here. Also, if you miss any of the conversation, jump in the archive. Absolutely free. YouTube.com/@spacedoutradio. As we go ahead and jump back into the conversation here, and I'll start with one of the questions here that we had pinned. This is Woo Writers DG asking, does the guest have, okay, this is what you read. Does the guest have any receipts on phenomena he experienced? So any data that you've captured, do you have any?
Right. So first of all, the main data we use is human beings and witness testimony. But we've had cases where using environmental sensors and a psychic, or just the witnesses themselves, we've actually had some incredibly, there was one case I had in Florida where we had multiple types of EMF sensors. We had a thermal vision camera, which picked up something. We had temperature sensors. We had a Geiger counter, which went off, which was bizarre. All the while, a medium was talking to the ghosts that people had been seeing, experiencing. All of it was going off, and the thermal vision actually showed something floating, which the company, when they analyzed the data, said, yeah, there's nothing that would cause this normally. So that's one. We also got some unusual sounds on there that could not be tracked back to anything that could have actually caused it. We've got other environmental information. Sometimes when there's other activity going on, it's rare, but we can sometimes get things moving on camera. We've had that happen in a couple of cases. Usually we had one case where there was a lot of physical phenomena. The ghost was the former bartender owner and was playful. And most of the stuff happened right behind the camera. So we still got a couple things on camera just by chance, but it's pretty rare. But in general, because ghosts are not optical, the only way you're going to get that on camera is if they put that image on the camera. And the same thing for audio. You know, most EVP is not really that clear and it's not good, but we've had a couple of instances where there were direct responses and in context, you didn't need interpretation to figure out what was going on, which is the problem with a lot of EVP.
All right. And we do have another question here. Mel WD40 asking, but what about the Buddhists believe how the Dalai Lama reincarnate and remembers their past life? This is part of that earlier conversation.
Yeah. Different cultures have different beliefs in how reincarnation happens and the rules of reincarnation. The Dalai Lama in Tibetan Buddhism is one specific instance, and there are not similar ones, but there are some longer term, like multiple life type situations in other religions, in other cultures around the world. But what's really interesting about looking at this particular belief, 1.5 billion people believe in some form of reincarnation. That's a lot of people in the world. It's actually probably closer to 2 billion at this point. In some cultures, so for example, there was a study done with Inuits in northern Canada, and in the Inuit belief is that you could only be reincarnated. You could not. No, that's right. You could only be reincarnated in direct family line. So you could be reincarnated as your great grandfather, but you couldn't be Bill from New York. because you were not related to that person. In other cultures, the belief is you can never be reincarnated with someone in the direct family line. And we see all sorts of how those beliefs shape the reincarnation reports, or sometimes shape the actual, maybe shaping the actual reincarnation in some respects.
Okay.
It varies around the world.
All right. And then T-Bone is asking you, what are the smells, i.e. cologne, cigars, and such? Like, what are
Well,
they?
like I said, you're not seeing the ghost with your eyes. You're also not smelling the ghost with your nose. There are what are called olfactory apparitions. Instead of picking up a visual, you're picking up a particular smell associated with the person when they were alive, or you're picking up a particular smell associated with the event that was recorded into the environment. It's information that your brain says this is a smell.
Okay.
It's not actually a physical smell.
And is that part of the whole residual sort of?
It could be residual, or a lot of times people will pick up on somebody who used to smoke a pipe in the building or something like that, who used to live there, who still may be alive somewhere, but somehow that became part of the imprint at that point. But there are also those cases of, in fact, the first time I had an apparition experience was because of smell. It had nothing to do with visual or auditory anything. So it was a moving smell. You'd kind of follow it around the room with your nose. And it related to the deceased wife from 20 years before of a friend of mine.
I've had that before. I've had like a rancid smell that kind of moved around and disappeared as well. So yeah, totally get that one. We have Linda asking, do you believe spirits visit you in dreams?
Yes. Those are called visitation dreams. Psychic dreams in general feel different, or what we hear from people is they're very, very real. They don't seem like other dreams. The conversation seems to be very real. I had that happen to me after my grandfather died back in the 80s. And so I've had that experience myself. But that does come up with people having an extensive conversation, very emotional, beyond just you're having a dream because you're grieving about something. It's much, in fact, it's usually very relieving of grief when that happens.
All right. And let me see, was that the last question for now? Last question for now. I did want to ask you, I guess, while we wait for another question here. Let's see. What steps? No, actually, I wrote something down for you here. See if I can find that. Okay. All right. So what this is what it was. It was what when you go and you gather your data, do you have like old cases that maybe you haven't worked on that you're able to weigh your data against, or do you find yourself like collecting data for the first time in a lot of these cases?
Frankly, all of my cases have patterns that have appeared in past cases. The literature in the field goes back to, in some respects, it actually goes back before 1882, which was the founding of the Society for Psychical Research, which is still in existence. There was a woman who wrote a book, which you can find, it's in print, called The Night Sight of Nature. She was a journalist. In 1848, she collected, it was the first real collection of people's psychic experiences and ghostly experiences. So it's dense. It's really a lot of stuff. So we match the patterns we're looking for, the patterns we're expecting to find, or at least run across, do match up with what we've learned before. And it's really important for anybody getting into ghost hunting or doing investigations to know what those models and patterns are that have kind of played out over the years. Otherwise, you're just recreating the wheel. And I've talked to ghost hunters who are fans of the TV show, and they said, hey, I got this idea. Can you tell me if this might be right? I said, yeah, it is right. But Frank Podmore came up with it in 1890. You should have known that.
True fact. True fact. I tell people all the time, they know, they probably sick of me saying this, but I tell them like historical data is a good measure or indicator for something you're dealing with currently, or you may come across in the future. And that's why it's so important. Yeah. And it's so important that you submit your data, is regardless on how irrelevant you think it is, because it's it needs to be there for other people to go back and look up on. So I'm just glad you said that, because kind of validates what I tell people here all the time. See, guys, I'm not just saying stuff. I'm kind of right sometimes, but okay. With that being said, I know we did have another question here. Fast Heavy put forth says, can pets visit us too? We've heard my dog numerous times.
Yes, the answer is yes. There are plenty of really good cases of animal ghosts, and they almost always are pets who were close to us when they were alive. In fact, one of my cats was hanging around after she died for a little while, so we kept catching glimpses of her. So I know some really good ones. There actually are cases reported as far back as the early 1900s. There was a book on animal ghosts by Elliot O'Donnell that came out in the early 1900s that is available, I think, for free on the Internet Archive. So there's a lot of cases like that, and some other psychic animal type things, not necessarily ghostly, but yes, they can.
Wow. Okay. What would you so far? What has been one of the most like eyebrow raising encounters that you've come with, something where you really learned something new and it was kind of blew your mind?
Well, I have to say that a case I had back in very early '85, so it was actually '84, '85, was kind of not the eye-opening case, but it was the case that brought me to, okay, there's no possible explanation other than there's really a ghost here, an apparition here. And it was a family that was curious about what was going on. They'd all separately been seeing this woman's ghost since they moved into this house that had been built a number of years before. The woman who previously owned it had died about a year and a half before they moved in, not in the house. She died in the hospital, but she had lived in this house all her life. And she was appearing to everybody, but it turned out that it took about a year and a half for the kid to fess up. But their son, who was 12, a little over 12 at the time, mentioned that he was talking to the ghost every day. And the mother says, what ghost? He says, the one that you, dad, and grandma are seeing, but aren't talking about to each other. And then they found out that they were all seeing the ghost separately. We ended up, as part of the investigation, part of the process, we sat in the living room with the mother, Pat, her son. Pat's mom was there visiting. The husband was out of town at the time. The boy is sitting in a chair, and next to him is an empty chair. And he says, that's where Lois is sitting. And we got to ask the ghost questions about, what happened when you died and why haven't you moved on? And she was one of those people who was afraid of, was there heaven? Was there hell? I don't really know. I'm going to stay here. And then we got some really interesting information about, there was no way this kid could possibly have even thought of this or found books easily on this. But how is it you can see her right now, but we can't? And he said, because she's connecting with me and I'm getting a visual image of her. I mean, it was basically what I've talked about early on, not optical, it's psychic. And she was connecting with the kid on this. And then it was a very weird situation because this was not too long after Ghostbusters. So we even got questions, and I think they were from the kid. Do you carry blasters or have blasters or ghost traps as well? And we had a kind of laugh about that. And then I said, any questions for us? And the first one was, do you carry blasters? I said, no, we can't even get insurance for them. Just very kiddingly. And then it was a question to myself and the other two investigators that related directly to a conversation we'd had in the 40-minute drive from the university to this house. Nothing to do with the paranormal whatsoever. 3 different topics. And each of the questions was directly relevant to the conversation. So they would have had to bug my car, or this kid would have been incredibly psychic. There was just no way they could have known these things. Like something like, Lloyd, what kind of new car do you want to buy? We were talking about that. So I said, how does she know to ask us these questions? And he kind of said, he looked over and he says, she didn't trust you guys. So she went to the university and got in the backseat of your car and just kind of hitchhiked and listened in on your conversation.
Wow.
And that coupled with family stories that were told to us, the boy said the ghost was giving him, that I had to track down the only living relative of this woman to confirm the stories. And every one of the stories I was told, I would start the story and this 92-year-old guy would finish the story.
Wow.
So that was just like, okay, there's no other explanation for this.
That's bananas right there, definitely. Do you run into, because I know some ghost groups will have a person on their team usually, which is a person that does this sage sort of
Oh
experience.
yeah.
Yeah. Do you do any of that stuff at all? And how do
Well,
you
first, it's become common in New Age practice for people to smudge the houses with sage, supposedly get rid of bad energy. That
Yeah.
doesn't do anything but make your house smell. That is an adaptation, kind of a stealing of part of a Native American ritual, which involves intention and some other things. So, smudging a house does nothing. You're more likely to erase the energy by walking around and touching the walls and thinking of your happiest memories. That's more likely to change things than smudging the house with sage. But the ghost hunting groups do what they see on TV, and they never ask why or whether it works. They just do it.
Wow. That's pretty. Hey, I like that. Okay. So there is no such thing as releasing a spirit and allowing
Releasing a spirit, yeah,
yeah.
releasing an actual spirit is communicating with the spirit and saying, "Hey, what you doing?" I usually tell people we need to know a couple of things. Who are you? What are you doing here? Like, why are you here? What can we do for you?
Yeah.
What do you need? What can we do for you? And sometimes, honestly, what's really interesting is all they needed is for somebody to acknowledge that they exist. That's
Mm.
kind of sad when it comes right down to it, because usually the families are ignoring them because they're too afraid. Sometimes they need something else, like a message passed on. Sometimes they need, we've had how we've gotten rid of ghosts sometimes is annoying them out of a house if if they don't really stress, they don't want to leave. So usually playing the same music, if you can figure out what they don't like, play that music over and over again until they get so annoyed they leave. It
So
does work. It actually does work. Music is used in a lot of cultures for in different ways. And the other thing is, came to find out, this was really an interesting thing. Having the psychic or medium or even the witness say, was there anything you wanted to do during your life that you never, or someplace you wanted to go that you never could go? Like, what's on your bucket list? What was on your bucket list for going someplace? And telling them, look, you're not stuck here in the house. Hop a plane. I had one case where the response from the medium was looking at me like I was nuts when I asked that question. And I said, and the guy apparently said he always wanted to go on safari when he was alive in Africa. I said, hey, go to Africa. You can get in the face of a lion. He can't do anything to you.
true.
Family never saw him again.
Wow.
I don't know if that's what he did, but the family never saw him again. So be a tour guide. Tell them, give them advice on travel.
That's awesome. Actually, before I have one more question for you before I
Yeah.
get to the guest question or viewer question. So, do you think there is ever a time that they may be unaware, just like the movie The Sixth Sense, unaware that they passed on and think
Yeah.
that they're still alive?
Yeah, I mean that is a normal human reaction. I think I mentioned this earlier that when people sometimes get a diagnosis of a terminal illness, that they go into denial for a while.
Yeah, yeah.
So that is possible. But when you think about it, it's really weird. It's a weird quirk of human psychology. It's not because they're a ghost. It's because they're human that they're in denial about that or ignore that. It'd have to be really psychologically not aware of anything around you to not figure out that you're dead, because you can walk through walls, nobody's seeing you. I mean, all that stuff. So it's just really, it helps to do a little counseling with the ghost, which you can do without a license, fortunately, because they're dead.
All right, let me get to T-Bone's question here, saying the Philadelphia experiment.
Phillip Experiment, yeah.
The Phillip Experiment. Okay, if you did not see this earlier, Mr. Rob G would really like his opinion on this.
Yeah, the Phillip Experiment was a real thing. There is a book which is hard to find called Conjuring Up Phillip, in which there was a group in Toronto that was trying to use the kind of the psychology, the rules of psychokinesis, of mind over matter, to see if they could cause things to happen, like physical things to happen. And the way they did that was to create a ghost. They made up a character. The only part of his history that was at all true was the location. They picked a real castle in England and made up this character, Philip. And then they sat around a card table, and asked Philip, tried to contact Philip. So the idea was that because we as human beings have a bias and don't do mind over matter, it's you have to get the people past the psychological block to do that. If you got a group and you can blame it on a spirit, it's much easier for things to happen. And they did have knockings and all sorts of things happening in the light. By the way, they didn't have to turn the lights out for that. So it really was based on the psychological statements that most of us ignore things moving because it's just too weird. That's called witness inhibition, and we don't like to own up to doing mind over matter because it's too scary for us.
Also,
So
final question is Paramarv, who wants to know what are Lloyd's thoughts on black eye kids, paranormal or not?
We don't deal with them. I mean, it has nothing to do with us. It's not psychic, so it's not anything that we would deal with. Just like we really don't deal with UFO stuff.
Okay.
I really have no opinion. I don't know anything about that stuff other than hearing that people see black-eyed kids, kind of thing.
Well, I would love to have this last few minutes here for you to go ahead and talk about where people can find your information.
Sure.
And yes, go ahead and go into that.
So my website is loydauerbach.com. So please note the spelling of my first name, otherwise you'll never find it. It is just with one L. That there is a media page there which has links to a lot of podcasts. I'll put up a link to this one, of course. I have two YouTube channels that one has a lecture channel. It's just youtube.com/prof paranormal, PROF as in Professor Paranormal. And then I have one with a lot of media clips from TV that I've done, which is just youtube.com/Loyd Auerbach. But every other Sunday, although I'm going to shift this a little bit in May, I've got one coming up actually this coming Sunday. I do a live Q&A on YouTube called Ask Professor Paranormal. And it is at 8:30 p.m. Eastern, 5:30 p.m. Pacific. The next one, like I said, is this coming Sunday on the 13th. And it is youtube.com/@Ask Professor Paranormal. You can also follow me on Twitter, Blue Sky, Instagram, just simply @Prof Paranormal, as in Professor Paranormal, Prof Paranormal for that. Yeah.
All right, good stuff. And our mods are awesome, always putting that information into the chat.
Thank you.
You guys see where you can pick up Lloyd's books and also where you can find them on social media. We have one question trickle in here at the end. Woo Riders DG. Almost like, should I even ask this one? But we're going to do it because I know some ghost hunters have asked this or said this at least. Have you ever had any cases where the ghost or entity violates the person sexually? And if so, how would you stop it to get rid of the ghost or entity?
So no, the answer is no. But I'll say we have had residual haunting cases where people are in a place where somebody was violated sexually and the person picks it up and feels it. That's number one. Also, I've had poltergeist cases, a couple of them where poltergeist comes from the unconscious mind of a living person. It's mind over matter. Sometimes it's self-directed. And that has happened as well with the sexual stuff, but not ghostly sexual activity. I know Kesha has reported that a bunch of times, but
yeah,
not that we know of.
I've heard some things, and I just always ask myself, like, why? Like, what would be the reason? It doesn't make sense. Once again, one of the biggest tools we have is common sense and logic, and when you apply it, you'll usually find the answers that you're looking for. Appreciate you coming in and having this conversation with us tonight, Lloyd. This 2 hours went by really fast, and we'd love to have you back. Obviously, I have your data, so I'll be reaching out then. So with that being said, guys, make sure you show Lloyd love here in the chat. And Lloyd, you have a great rest of your night as I get ready to take our break. Talk to you soon.
Thank you very much.
All right, take care. All right, guys, that is Loyd Auerbach. Fast 2 hours, totally awesome guest here. And we are going to get ready to jump into our final hour of the show here. This is the After Hours Radio Show edition of Dave's show, because I'm filling in for Dave tonight, which means, I can do whatever I want to, right? I think we will definitely have a visit by Tim James with the UFO Report Hour 3. Also, some Steve Stockton tells Untold Mr. Person Mysteries. So make sure you come back. If you leave, come right back.
Conversations that move the needle.
You're listening to After Hours with Mr. Rob G on the only place where you can own the night. Spaced Out Radio.
Spaced Out Radio. You've tuned your dial to the right frequency.
All right. See you guys in 5. All right, welcome back, Spaced Out Radio. After hour number 3, we have about 20 seconds left till we come back from radio. Guys, it's going to be a fantastic show. Hour 3, action-packed. Make sure you don't go anywhere. Also, I need a couple guests on my show, my experience with the phenomena. If you have any experiences with the phenomena, go ahead and reach out, booksocialshow@gmail.com, so we can get you set up. 2 seconds, coming back right now. All right, system crashed on us, but no fret. Do not fret as we get ready to do this all over again here. Give me just a second. All right, let's go ahead and try that again here right now. All right, everybody, welcome back. Spaced Out Radio, the After Hours Radio Show. This is hour number 3, where we want to thank our guest here, Loyd Auerbach, for hours 1 and 2 being awesome. Hour 3 here, we'll have Steve Stockton tell us Untold Misperson Mysteries, as well as getting into a UFO report with Tim James. Maybe some UFO and weird news to round out the show. Make sure, if you missed any of the conversations tonight, hop in the archives. Absolutely free. YouTube.com/Spaced Out Radio. As we get ready to jump right on into Steve Stockton Tells Untold Missing Person Mysteries. Here we go.
Welcome to Tales Untold and Missing Persons Mysteries on Spaced Out Radio's After Hours. My name is Steve Stockton, and I'm here to take you on a journey of mysteries, legends, and true stories. Come, join me on this strange adventure of Tales Untold and Missing Person Mysteries. Number 1, Ranger Ralph W. Heath. Ralph W. Heath was a park ranger at Baxter State Park in Maine, United States, who allegedly died of exposure while attempting to rescue a woman who was lost on Mount Katahdin in 1963. On Monday, October 28th of that year, 2 women, Helen Mower and Margaret Auerbach, both from Concord, Massachusetts, took the Cathedral Trail and climbed Baxter Peak on the mountain. They reached the summit and stopped to have lunch at around 1:30 in the afternoon. When the 2 friends decided to start their hike again and head back down, they had a small argument over the route Margaret wanted to take. Helen simply wanted to go back the way they came, but Margaret wanted to bushwhack, which, very simply put, means to leave the established trail or get off the beaten path, as it were. Helen knew how risky this was, although Margaret had more hiking experience than she did, not by much, and only 3 years total. She thought it way too dangerous and stormed off to take Dudley Trail, which was the original trail they had taken to get there in the first place, and let her friend make her own mistakes and go her own way. It was a decision she would later regret very much. Margaret, on the other hand, thought she was taking a shortcut and laughed off her friend's warnings, and they went their separate ways, agreeing to meet at the Chimney Pond lean-to. When Helen reached the final destination and saw there was no sign of Margaret, she decided to wait, but got very worried very quickly. Though it was a nice and sunny day out that day, a nor'easter was blowing in, and the weather was about to very quickly take a turn for the worse. She started calling for Margaret at the headwell near and towards the mountain itself. She was pleasantly surprised when she heard her friend respond and started calling back, despite the fact she was asking for help. Margaret yelled that she was not hurt, but was stuck in the treacherous terrain and wouldn't possibly be able to continue her turn back, and pleaded with Helen to go and get some help. This is when Helen made her way to the ranger station and encountered Ranger Ralph Heath having dinner. She explained the situation, and Ralph immediately knew how dangerous that path was and how serious a problem they had. He was, however, thanking his lucky stars, in his mind at least, that there hadn't been any snowfall, at least not yet. As any other year, for as far back as he could remember, there would have been snow covering the mountain for weeks at that point in the year. Ralph followed Helen back to Chimney Point and yelled out in the direction of Margaret and instructed her in a very calm and clear voice to stay where she was and not try to move or go anywhere. Help was on the way. With the wind increasing like it was, Ralph knew that the situation could go from scary to deadly in a matter of just seconds. He had to act fast. He took Helen back to the ranger station and radioed his supervisor, Heelan Taylor, and told him there was a hiker stranded in the upper basin on the mountain. Now, a little background on Mr. Ralph Heath to show what a brave man he was indeed, and how he was definitely not someone to shy away from trouble. He served in World War II and was honorably discharged. However, a house fire destroyed everything he owned but the clothes on his back, including his discharge papers. He was redrafted to serve in the Korean War before anyone could verify he had already been discharged and had finished his service to the country. Ralph, however, went without hesitation to serve, only for his wife to decide she didn't want to deal with another tour, especially one he shouldn't have had to have gone on, and file for divorce. So, this was a man who was seeking solitude and peace in his life after all of this tragedy and heartbreak, and he absolutely loved his job as a ranger and the beauty of the mountains. Despite the weather outside becoming more and more perilous and the orders from the supervising ranger that they had to wait until morning to attempt any kind of search and rescue, Ralph decided the risk to Margaret was too great, leaving her out there all alone at night. Snow was definitely coming, and a lot of it. He decided to attempt to rescue himself, despite it being nightfall and dark outside. The temperature had drastically dropped as well. He borrowed Helen's backpack and filled it with essentials such as food, a sleeping bag, water, a parka, and extra clothes. He also took 80 feet of rope and at 11 p.m. that same night, headed alone down Dudley Trail. It wasn't until 5 hours later, at 4 in the morning, that he reported back to Helen. He told her he had spoken to Margaret about an hour after heading out and was able to obtain her location when he again told her to stay put and assured her help was on the way. She reiterated she was uninjured, but very cold. She's probably more than a little scared as well, I'm sure. He told Helen that Margaret was near the waterfall and he wouldn't be able to reach her without more rope and more people. This was an area that even ice climbers considered treacherous and dangerous. Ralph was also extremely concerned because Margaret was refusing to stay and wait for help to arrive and was determined to find a way out herself for fear she would freeze to death before anyone would be able to rescue her. After reassuring Helen and telling her what was going on, he contacted his supervisor, Heelan Taylor, and made him aware as well. Taylor dispatched the Maine Forest Service, 2 additional park rangers, and a Maine game warden. By 6 in the morning, Tuesday the 29th, an icy rain began to fall and the wind had picked up drastically. Ralph Heath ate his breakfast and then informed Helen Maurer of his plans. He was going to ascend the ravine from Chimney Pond, climb straight up the head wall and into the waterfall, where he would provide comfort to Barbara, and if he couldn't manage to rescue her himself, at least she wouldn't be scared and alone, and he would wait with her until the additional resources arrived to get them both out. Now, he was clearly putting himself at great risk, knowing it was unlikely he would be able to do anything but just sit with Margaret and wait. Yet, he did it anyway. He was truly a hero. While the plan was very reasonable, and despite being a chain smoker, Ralph was in great shape and a capable hiker and climber. However, he had hiked Dudley Trail 4 times in the last 24 hours, and it was a very strenuous and hard trail to get through. He was absolutely exhausted at this point and shouldn't have been doing any more hiking or climbing without getting some much-needed rest. This would, after all, be a trailless climb he was planning to make. He wasn't going to leave Margaret, however, so the admonishments and warnings from his co-workers and even Helen fell on deaf ears. Ralph reached Barbara just as Hurricane Jenny reached the mountain. He sat with her for a little while and the two hunkered down. A ranger sergeant set out on foot towards Chimney Pond as well and stated that, by the time he got to just the basin, the conditions were whiteout with gale force winds. By noon, not even the jeeps could make it to the trailhead. There was 18 inches of snow already and more falling fast. He even reported that, only halfway up the mountain, His clothes had frozen solid and literally cracked at the elbows. Having no visibility and facing merciless winds, not to mention the condition of his clothing, forced him back down the mountain. He stated he knew that both Ralph and Margaret were in some very serious trouble, as help could no longer get to them. It would be impossible for them to help themselves as well. The following morning, Wednesday, October 30th, 1963, Warden Supervisor David Priest returned to Roaring Brook and set up what we today call an incident command center and had at least 35 people there working at all times. All different avenues of help were brought in and explored, but nobody could do anything as the snow was still accumulating and fast on Friday morning. Flash forward to November 1st. Now it had been 5 full days since Margaret had gotten herself stuck and 4 whole days since Ralph Heath had joined her to provide comfort and possible rescue, which we know now he was unable to do. On Saturday, November 2nd, all teams and persons involved decided that any rescue attempts were futile, that they were simply wasting resources at that point. Mr. William Lowell Putnam III was one of the most experienced mountaineers in the country at the time and had been helping with the rescue effort since Friday. Finally, on Sunday, November 3rd, he made the statement that he believed Ralph and Margaret had most likely died on Tuesday and reiterated the waste of resources should they continue on this impossible trek to try and save them. It wasn't until almost 6 months later, in April of 1964, that Margaret Ivesick's body was found and finally able to be brought down the mountain and sent home. Even at this time, though, they needed chemical salts to melt the ice so as not to damage the corpse in any way, and the rescue still took an additional 3 days. It was found during the autopsy that Margaret was severely injured and hadn't survived more than a few hours due to the extreme blood loss. Her official cause of death was exsanguination. In other words, she bled out. 2 weeks later, on May 15th, they finally found Ralph's body. He was found, oddly enough, 400 feet above where Margaret was found. They airlifted him out of there, and his autopsy showed nothing at all. The coroner stated, "It looks as if he simply sat down and went to sleep," which is not uncommon when people freeze to death.
All right. Tales Untold, Mr. Person Mysteries. Once again, I want to thank Steve Stockton for being a part of the After Hours radio show where we do what we do. And right now, we're going to do something a little different. Because I'm filling in for Dave Scott, it means we have the UFO report here in hour number 3 with none other than Tim James. We bring him on in. Yes, the UFO report with Tim James. Got the creepy, freaky music bringing you on in here tonight. It's been a while. We don't get to do this often, but it's cool when we do. How have you been?
I've been good. How about yourself, sir?
You know, I have been cool. I've been good. Filling in for Dave Scott, big shoes to fill. And I just hope he's watching somewhere saying that was a great show.
Well, you never know. I don't know. I missed a few phone calls from him tonight, so I was like, oh, he might be sleeping already. That's a long trip. That's true. That he did call me on that road trip. Said it was about 3.5 hours till the house. I'm like, whoa, okay, that's a drive. Mm-hmm. That's a drive. What you got for us on the UFO report tonight? Well, what do I have here? So we've all probably heard the rumors that Arrow and Mr. Jake Barber are coming together. So it seems to be that, they have joined forces. Wonder Twin powers have activated. So in a development that has sent ripples through the UFO research community, the U.S. Department of Defense's All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, also called ARROW, has reportedly entered into a partnership with Mr. Jake Barber, U.S. Air Force veteran turned whistleblower, to investigate claims of government involvement with UAP. Barber, who first gained public attention in January of 2025, with allegations of participating in secret missions to recover non-human technology, is now working alongside Arrow to substantiate his claims, marking a significant shift in the Pentagon's approach to UAP transparency. So Jake Barber, as we may or may not know, Former helicopter pilot with extensive military experience, emerged as a key figure in the UAP disclosure movement earlier this year. In an exclusive interview with News Nation's Ross Coulthart in January of 25, Barber detailed his involvement in what he described as a covert UFO crash retrieval program. He recounted a specific mission where he flew 150 feet above an egg-shaped object, approximately the size of an SUV. I saw an egg, a white egg, Barber told Coulthart. It was inconsistent with anything I'd ever seen before. Barber's claims were bolstered by video evidence he provided, which he asserted depicted the retrieval of this anomalous craft. While some hailed the footage as the clearest image of a UAP or UFO ever taken, skeptics argued it fell short of conclusive proof. Following his public disclosure, Barber faced scrutiny from the Department of Defense, which initially denied his claims. Yet Barber's persistence and the growing chorus of whistleblowers appears to have prompted a reassessment within the Pentagon. Arrow has historically been cautious in its public statements. Under its previous director, Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick, Arrow focused on cataloging and analyzing incidents reported by military personnel, allegedly, often downplaying speculation about extraterrestrial origins. However, since Dr. John Kozlowski assumed leadership, the office has adopted a more open posture towards whistleblowers' testimonies. So in February, Arrow confirmed it was investigating Barber's allegations, adding his case to its roster of 21 ongoing UFO/UAP probes. This announcement followed Barber's assertions in an interview with podcaster Jesse Michaels that he and his team had established a relationship with Arrow. We're conducting demonstrations for the new director of Arrow, Barber said. They've seen our videos, our data, and our report. He further claimed that all information he shared publicly was also being provided to Arrow, suggesting an unprecedented level of cooperation. The most concrete evidence of Arrow's collaboration with Barber emerged in recent days. So on the 6th of April, a report that News Nation had covered Arrow's partnership with Barber, including a visit by Arrow officials to a range where Barber's team allegedly conducted a UFO summoning experiment. This partnership represents a bold step for Arrow, which has faced criticism for its perceived reluctance to engage with whistleblowers. So in March of 2025, obviously just last month, the Department of Defense refused to confirm or deny the existence of records related to Barber or his communication with Arrow, fueling accusations of opacity. Despite the DoD's lack of confirmation, Barber expressed optimism about the relationship, stating Skywatcher has had positive initial interactions with Arrow under Dr. John Kozlowski. The partnership has elicited a range of reactions. Advocates for UAP disclosure, including investigative journalist Ross Coulthart, view it as a validation of years of effort. The evidence is now getting pretty overwhelming that this is real, Coulthart remarked, a sentiment echoed by many in disclosure communities. Barber himself has framed his mission as one of public service, posting on X, "We're not alone. The skies are not classified and our consciousness can't be redacted." Skeptics, however, caution against overinterpreting the collaboration. For now, Barber's journey from Air Force veteran to whistleblower to Arrow partner underscores the evolving landscape of UAP disclosure. Whether this collaboration breaks new ground or stalls amid bureaucratic resistance, it has undeniably thrust Jake Barber and the question of what lies beyond our skies into the spotlight.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome stuff there. And, I actually watched the Jake Barber interview, and I'm actually doing a show about it too soon coming up. But, I, from what I saw, I applauded the fact that he was stepping back out to get into the research area, and that he also during this conversation stated how they were going to do their due diligence and they weren't going to be quick to release photos or videos until they had taken them through this 6-step process, which is supposed to really vet the information so that, as he specifically says, they don't have a situation where they release something that gets easily debunked by the armchair skeptics out there. I'm okay with that. I'm on board with that. I think that's okay.
Well,
The
yeah,
relationship with
because
Arrow, though.
mm,
Mm,
isn't that just I've heard it called this a few times, but and I may get this just a little wrong, but don't they call it, people are referring to Arrow as the fly paper for whistleblowers, right? It's like, I don't know. I mean, I've still got a bad taste in my mouth from Kirkpatrick and the way that it was dealt with him. But it's we've got a kinder, gentler person in charge now, but is that part of hey, come on over. We're your buddies, or are we serious? I mean, obviously time always tells and that everything comes out in the wash, but I hope not. That would be good. And the other thing with Barber, like you said, that's true. I mean, people, and I think a lot of people are impatient, and we want the proof, we want the proof, we want to see it, we want to see it, and understandable. But I think that this way we don't have a unidentified lighting phenomenon uh,
mhm.
picture up on the screen at a conference. I mean, yeah, cover your bases and make sure that what you're putting out there is actually factual, because I mean, we all know it's so annoying with all the experts out there, and it's just wading through the garbage is sometimes just frustrating, and yeah, gives me a headache.
For sure. It's the responsible thing to do. I mean,
Mhm.
it is how, we need to be looking at that. And even I've said myself, just as members of this community, we should be a little more diligent in the vetting process of some of these things, even with whistleblowers, because it is true that when we look at whistleblowers, a lot of the time we automatically back them without really getting into the vetting process to see if they or are they not over embellishing, which I think
Right.
maybe some whistleblowers may have done,
Of
because the
course.
point is 100% of them are not liars, as skeptics would like to say. But then at the
Mhm.
same time, from our side, 100% of them can't be telling the truth. So definitely a vetting process to go through. I'm just glad that when he did resurface the Jake Barber, that he was resurfacing to announce something that is going to actually help the conversation.
Yeah.
His point of view was, why not include the government? Like, he feels like it should be okay to still also deal with the government in this aspect, but he
Mhm.
also commits to making the data transparent for us.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you go by what Burleson said last week, it's not the extraterrestrial beings, it's not any of that stuff that's classified. It's the stuff that they use to collect that data that's classified. And I reported on that last week, and I was like, "What? Okay, so now it's what type of camera and lens you use that's classified, but all the rest of this stuff isn't? Like, okay, right?
Mm,
Mhm.
I
Right?
think there's more to it, though.
Oh, yeah.
Truthfully, I had done something recently, just spitballing, but
Yeah,
I
yeah.
talked about how potentially, what would make more sense is maybe they saw some adversarial behavior in some of these
Mm,
extraterrestrial craft, which would then make a lot of sense why they are trying to keep it classified, and that would make sense. But if it isn't that, and they're just like, hey, we're trying to put the toothpaste back in the tube about the extraterrestrial presence. If it's just about them being here, obviously that isn't something that you should be able to classify. But I
yeah.
think when we talk about us as citizens and humanity and having a database to go to of real actual data, Barber's
Mhm,
committing to do that. And
mhm.
at this point, I don't see any reason why not to take him at face value on the mission statement for Skywatcher.
Yeah, I agree fully, 100%, 100%. And I'm hoping that, yeah, this doesn't end up being a flop, because, yeah, he seems to be doing the right things, I guess, is probably the best way to put it. And, you know, taking your time and bringing it out, and, nothing good comes rushed out, right? So,
Right.
it takes time to build and well, create, for lack of a better term, but also bring that evidence out and say, look, I've done everything I possibly can. We've researched this. This is what we're presenting. I don't know what else we can do to whatever, prove that this is here or this is what we've done. We can't make it's unusual and we can't debunk it, so to speak. So let's hope.
Once it goes through that 6-step process, then they've vetted it, double vetted, triple vetted it to the point to where the research has been repeatable, and they're able to say without a doubt that this is what it is we're looking at. I think that is okay and cool to do. As we get ready to jump into our break here right now with Tim James stepping in with the UFO report, it's going to be an awesome one, guys. Make sure you don't go anywhere. If you do, like I said, come right back, because we'll be here and we'll be talking about some stuff. So we'll see you right back here at Spaced Out Radio After Hours Radio Show edition. So I'm filling in for Dave Scott tonight. We'll see you back in a moment. All right, we are clear.
Yeah.
So Davey's on his way home. Davey should be at home by now, guys. I know somebody said he's in a hotel somewhere. No, Dave should be at home by now. And it's a matter of if he sleep or is he not sleep.
He's a night owl, but that drive, that's a long drive. I mean,
a windy drive too. Yeah.
You never know with Dave. Might get a text at 1:30 in the morning saying, hey, or sending me, you just never know.
If there was, when you're driving a long distance, driving the mountains versus driving flat roads, totally different ball game. So, I can see him being visually and just overall tired at the end of that drive.
Agreed. For sure.
But,
and what's it, 5 hours, I think, from the airport.
From Vancouver.
To here. And that's as long as he doesn't hit any delays. So, yeah.
On the 1-lane road into town.
Actually, it's 2 lanes into town, and then it merges into one.
Look, okay, I was like, Dave's not here, so I can do whatever I want. So I can say hockey sucks, hockey's bad, down with hockey. Man, what does Tim get?
What do you want? Waffles for supper?
Exactly. Do anything to make him to get up under his collar there.
So my question is in that realm, is toast breakfast food?
If it's under the moniker toast, I would have to say yes. Because you only put bacon and jelly and things like that with toast.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
And then when is breakfast? Is breakfast 6 a.m.? Is it 4 a.m.? So if he has something to eat at 4 a.m. on the way to the airport, is that technically breakfast? Did you have, you know what I mean? You got to get into the particulars dealing with Dave.
Yeah, no doubt. I'll eat pancakes anytime.
Yeah, I don't know what's wrong with him, man. Any time of the day. French toast, all that. I love breakfast. It's really a good, it gives you that same thing that you get when you start your day and you have a great breakfast. You get that at night, and it's an awesome feeling.
Yeah, like I do omelets sometimes. I'm doing some this week probably, but I love omelets too. It's like
that's what I'm talking about. My stepdad, he will wake up at 2:00 in the morning and fix a full-fledged Denny's breakfast with hash browns and steak and the whole nine at 2:00 in the morning. Yeah, so if you are able to catch him, then he'll put you in on the breakfast. But the guy is probably getting up in about an hour just to do that. I can almost guarantee you that. Which is awesome, actually.
No doubt. Too much for me at 2:30 in the morning, I'm thinking.
Yeah, it's just he has a weird eating pattern, so he'll skip dinner, but then he'll wake up out of a cold sleep at 2 in the morning and get up and fix a full-fledged breakfast.
Oh, that'd just put me back to sleep.
I tell my mother, we laugh about this all the time because he's done this for the last 30 years, and no sign of stopping.
Nope. And why bother? Just keep on going.
Hillbilly Herb saying maybe name the new local hockey team the Squatchers. Oh, you're trying to get Dave on
Now
the front end and the back end. Yeah.
Yeah, you wind him up.
That's if he's watching or if he hops in the archive because it's absolutely free.
Yeah.
youtube.com/@spacedoutradio. So, also awesome stuff on the website, Tim. Man, you're rocking and rolling over there, man, and awesome stuff there.
Yeah, it's coming along good. I've taken a bit of a break off of it just as Dave and I got to go over some fine tuning, but yeah, I think we've got the basics laid out now. Now it's just time to make them better.
That's when I say spacedoutradio.com, the options are endless. Now I really mean it. Like Tim is really adding options to the website and they're endless at this point. So it'll be a working thing here coming soon.
Yeah, for sure. And the Patreon's up on the front page too, so you can join the Space Travelers Club.
Yes, please do. Please do. As we have about 20 seconds before we come back from our break tonight with our awesome guest, Loyd Auerbach. Hours one. He was really cool. What was I going to say? Something else. Oh, great song. 2 seconds left. Here we go. Oh, I knew it was going to do that. It crashed. Oh, I hate this. But, we're going to do it like it didn't happen. So, just a couple seconds here. All right, everybody, welcome back. Spaced Out Radio, the After Hours Radio Show edition. Filling in for Dave Scott tonight as we are right smack dab in the middle of the UFO report with Tim James. We're going to go ahead and continue that and then maybe finish the show off with some UFO and weird news. Like I said, if you missed any of the conversations tonight, make sure you hop in the archive. Absolutely, 100% free. youtube.com/@spacedoutradio as we jump right back into the UFO report with Tim James. So, Tim, as we were going to break there, did you were you finished with that story? Did you have anything else for us here?
No, I'm just going to let that develop and see what happens. But yeah, I ran into something today, and for me, this is kind of like, what? I don't know how to take this. Maybe lots of people have heard of this, so I'll get into it. And yeah, this is just different for me. So, as we know, Los Angeles, a city known for its eclectic mix of cultures, Hollywood glamour, and unconventional spiritual movements, has seen a new enigma on its hands, the so-called alien church. This emerging group has begun to capture the attention of locals, UFO enthusiasts, and skeptics alike, igniting debates about its origins, beliefs, and intentions. Excuse me. While details remain scarce, the alien church has reportedly acquired a facility for worship in the heart of the city, prompting a flurry of speculation and intrigue. The alien church first surfaced in public consciousness through posts on X, where many hinted at its presence. According to these sources, the group has established a physical space in Los Angeles, though its exact location remains undisclosed. One person claimed the church is poised to host gatherings that blend extraterrestrial themes with spiritual undertones, describing it as potential spiritual revolution or alternatively, the wildest UFO rabbit hole yet. Whether this is a genuine religious movement or a performance art stunt or something else entirely, it's still up for debate. What little is known about the alien church obviously suggests it may cater to those fascinated by the possibility of extraterrestrial life. Posts on social media platforms indicate that the group could be exploring a theology that connects humanity to cosmic beings, a concept that resonates with the growing subculture of UFO believers. Los Angeles, with its history of fringe movements like the Heaven's Gate cult in the 90s or the thriving New Age scene, seems a fitting backdrop for such an endeavor. Yet, unlike past groups, the alien church appears to be keeping a low profile for now, leaving observers hungry for more concrete information. The timing of the church's emergence is noteworthy. Recent years have seen a heightened public interest in UFOs, fueled by government disclosures and congressional hearings. Against this backdrop, the alien church's arrival feels less like a random quirk and more like a reflection of a broader cultural movement. Reactions in Los Angeles have been mixed. Some residents see it as a quirky addition to the city's tapestry. LA's always been a magnet for the weird and wonderful, said Javier Ortiz, a local barista near Hollywood Boulevard. If they're worshiping aliens, that's just another day here. Others are more skeptical, wondering if the church is a ploy for attention or a money-making scheme targeting the UFO curious. I'll believe it when I see their tax filings, quipped Sarah Ning, a freelance writer who's tracked the city's spiritual trends. Online, the alien church has already sparked lively discussion. Many have oscillated between fascination and mockery, with some calling it a disclosure-era cult and others joking about ET sermons. For now, the alien church remains shrouded in mystery. Is it a sincere attempt to fuse spirituality and the extraterrestrial social experiment, or simply a headline-grabbing gimmick? Without official statements from its leaders or even confirmation of who they are, speculation will likely continue to outpace facts. What's certain is it struck a chord in the city that thrives on the unusual, and its next moves will be closely watched. As Los Angeles braces for whatever the alien church has in store, one thing is clear. In a town where dreams and delusions often blur, this cosmic congregation is already making waves, whether from this planet or beyond.
Horrible freaking idea. Horrible freaking idea. Horrible freaking idea. 3 times. Ufology needs to stay away from religion, period.
Right?
It's already looked at as a UFO cult, even without this new church. Who thought of this? Who thought of it?
I don't know. I ran across it and I was like, am I the first? Like, I'm like, am I out of touch and not seen this before? Or is this just something new? And that's why I threw it out there. And I was like, okay, maybe I'm behind the times on this. And this is like, yeah, like, hey, Tim, catch up. But I was like, no, what are you doing?
It is ridiculous that well, here's the thing. So someone who has created this is probably looking for capitalizing off of its success financially. That's the way I look at it. I don't see any, because you don't need to create a religion, a church, in order to teach the history of ufology. You could do that just creating a class at school, which I think probably should be a thing. Maybe we should have classes in schools, but religion, I just don't see it. The two don't cross each other. Neither does politics. So how do you feel?
I agree. And when I read it, I was flabbergasted, and I was like, this got to be a joke, because I agree with you. My thoughts were the same. You cannot cross this. And, and like you said, do we need a place to worship? No, we just come to see Rob G on After Hours or Dave Scott on Spaced Out Radio. And then we get legitimate, uncrumpled up garbage information. It's simple. And yeah, I don't know if it's a good idea. That's my opinion too. Other people, I'm sure, may go, this is the greatest thing ever. Not judging. I'm just saying, I just don't think it's a good idea.
Now, you brought up some good reasons why. Heaven's Gate, right? And regardless because as I am older now and I look back on it, I'm like, okay, maybe they saw an alien that had a UFO sighting that kind of led into everyone believing that this could be a thing that's actually true as far as what this guy was talking about. But that's very dangerous, because we know these things are up there. So does it take only that to get a group of people to be like, wow, okay, UFOs do exist? Now they listen to everything you say from that point forward, and they do exactly as you say do. We had an example of this, which I don't know if you saw the show, where I interviewed Leon Ariel Malal, the rabbi with the Raelian group. And I just asked him, because, in that religion, they worship, I'll say worship, maybe it's not the right word, but they follow a person that's still living, a live human being, and saying that your connection is based on this individual. So you have to kind of go through this guy to get to the higher deities, or
he's the conduit, right?
So any red flag. And so that's what I'm saying. So if it's going to be some of that, I think it would be some of that. So there's just every reason to stay away from that. If you're in it, leave immediately. Leave immediately.
Yeah, the exits are to the left and to the right. Get the heck out.
Yeah. That is bananas, bonkers, just bananas.
Yeah,
I'm gonna have to look into that. What is the name of that group?
It's just called the Alien Church, and it's in Los Angeles. I actually looked some of it up on the web today. And yeah, there's some weird stuff there. I don't know if they've got a warehouse somewhere or something where they've got some like bits and pieces for their church. But yeah, I saw some pictures on it and stuff, and it was kind of like an alien, and it had a like almost like one of those Pope hats on and a robe and whole. I was like, dude.
All of the bad signs that tell you to turn around. But I'm close enough to go see that. And I think I might do that. I think I might.
You're gonna have to take pictures and let us know.
I'm gonna have to stir it up. I'm gonna have to stir the pot up so I can sit out there and see what it is that these people are doing and just see if there's any rationale or people using logic or just get more information on this, because this is new to me. And
okay, good.
We'll definitely take a look at this.
Right
Jay, we got somebody out there that says that sounds interesting. I don't know. We'll find out.
Definitely.
What else do we got tonight, Tim?
I got nothing much. I got a small little story, and I don't want to interrupt your news at the end here, but this one's kind of one of those history stories. As soon as I find, there it is. So this happened in 1978 in a small town called Frisco, Texas. So Ennio Sabati, a no-nonsense Italian immigrant turned Lone Star farmer, Eliano was out tending his cornfield one evening when he heard a noise, like a helicopter, but wrong. He looks up, and there it is, a glowing silver disc about 20 feet wide, hovering over his field like it's scoping out the best ears of his corn. No lights flashing, no take me to your leader nonsense, just a silent, shiny intruder. So later, he told reporters it was shaped like a turtle shell, which, well, let's be honest, the least intimidating UFO description ever. So now most folks might run screaming and snap a blurry Polaroid, but not him. He grabs his 12-gauge pointy stick, because what else do you do? Do you bring to an alien party? And he decides to defend his turf. So he fires a warning shot into the air, figuring that he'll scare off whatever's piloting the thing. And it doesn't flinch, it doesn't move, it just sits there. And he says it's like it was mocking him until it starts glowing brighter and then shoots straight up into the sky like a rocket-powered turtle, leaving him blinking in the dust. The next day, he calls the cops, and they show up with the FAA and even some UFO chasers in tow. They find a perfect circle burned into the cornfield, 20 feet across, just like he said. The plants inside scorched to a crisp, like someone turned a cosmic blowtorch on them. Outside the circle, totally fine. The feds poke around, take samples, and mutter back and forth, but he's not impressed. He tells a local paper, the Frisco Enterprise, I don't care if it's Martians or it's the CIA. I just want them off my land. So the story hits the wires, and suddenly he's a minor celebrity. UFO enthusiasts flood his farm, trampling more corn than the saucer he ever did. One guy even offers to buy the burned patch for $500, calling it alien art. His response, they can keep their money. I've got a pointy stick and a temper. By the time the Dallas Morning News ran the headline, Texas farmer fires at flying saucer, the whole thing has already become a legend. Was it really aliens? The FAA shrugged and said maybe the typical weather balloon got lost. Sure, one that glows and fries cornfields. Skeptics called it a hoax, but that crop circle wasn't fake, and he wasn't the type to waste ammo on a prank. So posts on numerous platforms decades later still bring it up, with one headline joking, if ET landed in Texas today, he'd leave with buckshot and a barbecue recipe. Mm-hmm. So there you have it. A UFO bold enough to buzz a farm and a farmer bold enough to shoot back. No little green men stepping out to apologize, but he taught us one thing. Don't mess with a Texan's corn. Even if you're from outer space, somewhere up there's an alien still nursing a bruised ego and a healthy fear of pointy sticks.
That story sounds like some Texas propaganda. Don't mess with Texas.
No.
We're bad enough to shoot these aliens out the sky, I'll tell you.
Yep, don't mess with my corn.
You know, yeah, I mean, I can understand. You know, the farmers definitely don't play about their crops. Crops are very important to sustaining the appetites of human beings. So I get that. So maybe it's just, yeah, you know, but ideally, you don't want to fire on a UFO. Never do. It's not really a great idea because you can literally start an intergalactic war that way over an ear of corn. So you got to ask yourself, risk versus reward. Is it really worth it? Is your family at risk? If your family isn't at risk, then it probably wouldn't point anything in the direction of a UFO.
Absolutely not.
Well, with that being said, Tim James, I do appreciate you coming in for the UFO report and helping me wrap up the show, man. It was awesome as always.
Yeah.
We'll be doing stuff again continuously. Great work again on the website and
Thanks,
awesome song. We got to figure out how we can put it in somewhere and make sure it lives on forever as well.
Nice. All right, everybody. Have a good night. Great show, Rob, and we'll talk to you soon.
All right, Tim James. Take care.
All right. You bet. Bye.
Tim James with the UFO report, guys. We're going to go ahead and jump right on into some UFO and weird news because why not?
Ladies and gentlemen, can I please have your attention? I've just been handed an urgent and horrifying news story. But I need all of you to stop what you're doing and listen.
All right, UFO and weird news. Let's see what we can get through today. First story I want to start with is terrifying footage of lost man, quote, lost man in Paris catacombs. Still has people calling it the scariest thing they've ever seen. It's not exactly clear what happened to the man in the creepy video. When you think of a trip to Paris, you're probably imagining the sparkling Eiffel Tower, those viral hot chocolates, or maybe snacking on a croissant by the Arc de Triomphe. But just like any other major city, there's some hidden parts to the French capital that you probably wouldn't be rushing to visit. The maze of tunnels sits underneath the Parisian streets, and rather eerily, they're filled with the remains of millions of people. The Paris catacombs are actually open to visitors, though. There's just a large part of them that are a total no-go. And let's be honest, you probably wouldn't want to go near them anyway, especially with people still calling the terrifying footage of a lost man the scariest thing they've ever seen. There's plenty of tales of people living down in the catacombs, stealing torches or maps or adventurers as some disappear. But most do manage to find an exit and eventually return to the surface. Only one confirmed death has occurred down there, that of a hospital worker, Phillip Experiment, in 1793. It's thought he lost his light source and couldn't find his way out of the darkness, with his body discovered 11 years later, a short distance away from one of the many exits. After such a long time down there, the only way he could be identified was his hospital key ring and his jacket buttons. Other evidence of people in peril in the catacombs has been unearthed over the years. In the early 1990s, a discarded camcorder was discovered, which appeared to show a man exploring the tunnels beneath the French capital. He starts running at one point, sprinting deeper into the darkness of the catacombs as though being chased by something. Then he drops the camcorder, which lands on the ground and shows his feet disappearing off down a tunnel. As you can imagine, the idea of getting lost underground in a maze of tunnels with no idea how to get out had people fairly creeped out. One person said, "You could add to my bucket list going into the catacombs," while others guessed that the guy panicked because he was lost and started running. But before you go expecting this to be the case of another catacomb victim, There's not exactly any proof to what happened. Nobody ever came back to claim the found camcorder as theirs. Nothing was ever shown to be chasing him, and there was never a body found. It's possible he was a panicked man who got lost under Paris and started running, dropping his camera before eventually finding a way out, or the whole thing is just simply a hoax. I don't know what you think about the catacombs, but that's definitely somewhere I'm not going to go. Next story here, bizarre case involving mysterious death of a man who never existed, which still remains unsolved. A man showed up to the Irish town of Sligo in 2009 and would be remembered for all the wrong reasons. People always seem to get hooked on a missing person case, whether it be through watching documentaries, doing some digging online, or keeping up with investigations. But what about the case of someone who never existed at all? This is exactly what happened to Sligo, Ireland, in what is now widely known as the Peter Bergman case. The man's body was found on the Sligo beach days after he checked into the Sligo City Hotel on the 12th of June 2009, where he stayed most of the time throughout his visit to town. While much of his movements and whereabouts were caught on CCTV, the reason for his visit still remains unknown by authorities. The man checked in with the fake name Peter Bergman, paid with cash, and carried a worn-out bag while providing an Austrian address as his home. Standing at a slender 5'10" build with short gray hair, blue eyes, and a slight tan, it was believed that he was in his late 50s or early 60s. Staff at the hotel noted that he spoke with a thick German accent. He had made his way from Ulster with no record of entry in Ireland, and it was assumed from his appearance that he was a professional worker and was seen smoking frequently in surveillance footage. For the following 3 days, he could be seen leaving the hotel with the purple plastic bag full of items, and every time he returned, it was empty. Authorities never worked out he threw away as he discarded it in blind spots of the CCTV cameras. It was noted that his movements appeared calculated and almost planned. Bergman was also seen buying 8 international stamps from the post office with airmail stickers. The next day, he asked a taxi driver for a nice, quiet beach location where he could swim. He suggested Ross's Point before driving him there. The same driver returned and dropped him off at the bus station into town. On 15th of June, Bergman checked out of the hotel around 1 p.m., still without ID or passport. Following the 5-month investigation, the Garda could not identify him or find any leads. On the morning of June 16th, his body was discovered at a beach by a father and son with clothes found on the shore nearby, as he was only wearing a T-shirt and underwear. Post-mortem took place and revealed he was in poor health. The official cause of death was determined to be acute cardiac arrest, as there was no water in his lungs, with no signs of struggle or injury. 16 years on from the incident, the man is still unidentified, with no relatives or friends coming forward. Authorities also made public appeals in Austrian and German publications in an attempt to find out who he really was. So that would be it for the UFO and weird news of the week, as this is the final night filling in for Dave Scott. He'll be back here tomorrow. I definitely want to go ahead and thank our guest for tonight, Loyd Auerbach, for being awesome, hanging out hours 1 and 2. Really flew by. You could access the archives for free, youtube.com/@spacedoutradio. Also want to thank Tim James stepping in with the UFO reports. Want to thank Steve Stockton tells Untold Missing Person Mysteries, as always. And I want to thank the man that you hear right here, right now, Ron Bumblefoot. He's the man that rocks us out each and every weeknight, every night, letting us know to never say never again, because, yes, the phenomena is real, which means anything and everything is possible. If you love the show tonight and you appreciate the conversation, make sure you hit the like button and also throw your horns up. It has been a pleasure hanging out with you guys tonight. Thanks for tuning your frequency to Spaced Out Radio, where we do what we do best. What's that you ask? We own the night. Spaced Out Radio, SOR Media Business Limited. The show's been copyright. Once again, it's been a pleasure serving you as your host. I'm Mr. Rob G. This is the After Hours Radio Show edition, filling in for Dave Scott. And as we get ready to go off air for the night, to all you space travelers, this is not a goodbye nor a farewell. However, you can best believe, as we go off air for the night, the next time we do this, it'll be same time, same place, to make sure you're here. We would love to see you back. Have a great rest of your night, guys. I will see you soon. Take care. All right. Awesome show, guys. Awesome show. Definitely appreciate everybody hanging out tonight. Like I said, Dave Scott will be back tomorrow in the captain's chair, and I will see you guys on the weekend, or you may catch me over at the Social Dig. Go and subscribe, youtube.com/@MrRobG. We have a lot of awesome conversations that we do over there. And until then, you'll see me back here next weekend, right? Doing it all over again right here on the After Hours Radio Show. If you don't normally come by on the weekends, consider doing that. Hit the notification bell, let you know next time we go live. Once again, 7 days a week, we're doing big things right here on Spaced Out Radio. So until next time, I will see you guys later as we rock up out of here. We want retribution. We're sick of it, and we need to get down to the bottom of things right now. And that's how we'll leave here tonight. Take care.
Cause we want retribution. Oh yeah, we want retribution. Oh yeah, we want retribution. Oh yeah, we want retribution. Yeah, we ran out of patience. Boil up with the